Hello everyone, I know you are going to use this video for falling asleep, so before that, like this video, subscribe to the channel and let me know where you are from, also what time is it. They say the house on Briar Lane was alive. Not alive in the way of warm blood and breath, not in the sense of movement or sound, though it did both when it wanted. No, alive like something ancient that had learned how to pretend to be dead. It watched. It waited. It remembered. And most of all, it whispered. It began with a letter, a plain white envelope with no return address, slipped under Evelyn Harrow's door on a gray Thursday morning. The ink on the page was uneven, as if the writer had been shaking, or worse, crying. One sentence was all it said: "You inherited the house. Don't go inside." It should have been ridiculous. Evelyn had no living relatives left, and no family she'd cared to keep up with. But she'd known the name as soon as she saw the postmark from Crestfall. That town hadn't crossed her thoughts in 15 years, not since the fire. Not since everything she knew turned to ash and silence. Her parents never spoke of Crestfall after they left. She remembered a single road slicing through dense pine forest, houses half swallowed by overgrowth, a church without a steeple. And at the very end of Briar Lane, a house with black shutters and a porch that seemed to lean forward like it wanted to whisper secrets in your ear. She had stayed there once, for a week. She never forgot the smell. The next day, she called off work and drove the 6 hours upstate. By the time she reached Crestfall, dusk had stretched its limbs across the sky, bruising the clouds with purples and reds. The town looked like it had sunk in on itself. Stores were boarded, lawns wild, no children, no laughter, only wind. Briar Lane was worse. Every house looked empty, curtains drawn like tight mouths refusing to speak. But the house at the end still stood, tall and straight, shutters blinking slowly in the breeze. She stopped the car and stepped out. The house hadn't aged. It was impossible. Every board, every rusting hinge was exactly as she remembered. The porch steps creaked under her weight like old bones settling, and the door, it wasn't locked. Of course it wasn't. It was waiting. Inside, the air was thick, syrupy. Her flashlight barely pierced the dark, its beam flickering as if it were reluctant to look. The living room was lined with bookshelves, all crammed with thick, leather-bound volumes that had no titles. Dust curled off them in small, lazy clouds. There was no power, no footprints in the dust, no sound, except the slow tick, tick, tick of a grandfather clock that hadn't worked since 1963. She should have turned around then, but she didn't. Something in the house felt familiar, not comforting, but recognizable, as if it remembered her too. She stepped deeper into the dark. That's when she heard it, a breath, not hers, not wind, not the house settling, a low, rasping exhale. Just to her left, where there was only a hallway leading into deeper dark. She turned, flashlight shaking, beam tracing warped wallpaper and old picture frames. They were all empty. Every single frame held only black space. Not faded photos, not cracked glass, just black. She stared into one, feeling an unease crawl behind her eyes. The blackness in the frame seemed to move, as if something was shifting behind it, pressing against the other side. The whisper came again, but this time it was closer. She spun and the light fell on the hallway again. Nothing, but the smell was back, like wet earth and smoke, sharp and raw. The same smell from the fire. She backed into the living room, breath hitching. The clock stopped ticking. Dead silence. Then footsteps. Upstairs. Slow. Heavy. One at a time. Thump. 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 There was nothing logical about it. The house was empty. It had to be. But Evelyn had never felt more certain of something in her life. She was not alone. And the thing upstairs wasn't human. She looked toward the staircase. The top was swallowed in darkness, and something about it. No matter how she stared, the upper landing never quite sat still. It pulsed, like it was breathing too. And then, a voice, soft, so close it could have been in her ear. Evelyn. She turned fast enough to make herself dizzy. Nothing behind her. The voice again, this time from above. You came back. We remember. She ran. Not up, not further in. She bolted for the door, only to find it shut. No sound, no wind. Just shut. She yanked at the handle. It didn't budge. The wood beneath her feet groaned. And then something scratched inside the door. From behind the wood. Something trying to get out. No. Not something? Someone. There was a muffled thump, like fists slamming against the other side. Then another. Then fingernails. Scratching. Her flashlight blinked. Once, twice, then died. The house went black, and the whispering returned. Louder now. Not one voice. Many. All around her. They chanted her name. They remembered. They never forgot. She pressed her hands over her ears, but it didn't matter. The whispers weren't outside. They were inside her head. She stumbled backwards and tripped over the edge of the rug, crashing to the floor. Silence. For one perfect moment, silence. Then, a child's giggle. Upstairs. Evelyn scrambled to her feet. She'd heard that laugh before. Not just anywhere. Here. That same sound echoed through her memories. Faint and smudged by time, but present. There had been a girl. She wasn't a sister. Not exactly. Not even a cousin. But they had played together. She had lived in the house. Her name was Marley, said the voice from above. You left me. No, no. It couldn't be. Marley died in the fire. She'd seen her. Trapped behind the second-story window, screaming. The firemen never found the body. Come upstairs, Evelyn, Marley whispered. I'm cold. The air dropped by 10 degrees. Evelyn's breath puffed out in clouds. She didn't want to go. Every part of her screamed run, even if there was nowhere left to run to. But her feet betrayed her. One step onto the first stair. The wood whispered underfoot, not creaking, whispering. As if it spoke in tiny syllables only the soul could hear. 2 steps. 3. The giggle came again. Clearer. But now it was wrong. Too many voices in that giggle. Like something was pretending to be Marley. She reached the landing, flashlight dead in her grip. Only moonlight filtered through a single stained window, painting the hallway in broken, blood-colored shards. There were 5 doors, all closed. One at the end of the hall had light under it, and the handle was turning. She took a step back. It stopped. Then, slowly the door creaked open. No one there. Just the smell, the smoke, the earth, and a shadow stretched far too long to belong to anyone alive. Evelyn turned to run, but the hallway behind her was gone. Not changed. Not different. Gone. Where stairs should have been, there was only black. Not darkness. Black. As if the house had cut off the exit, swallowed it whole. And now she was inside. Really inside. No way out. From the open door, a voice spoke in a song lilt, now we play. She stepped back, and something touched her shoulder. A hand, cold, small, childlike. She screamed and whipped around. Nothing, except a mark on her shoulder, a small, blackened fingerprint, as if someone burned it into her skin. And then the door slammed shut. She was alone. And the house laughed, not a single voice, but all of them. Evelyn Harrow had returned. The house on Briar Lane had waited 15 years. Now the games would begin. And this time, it wouldn't let her go. The door behind her didn't just slam shut, it sealed. There was a thick, nauseating sound, like wet flesh pulling tight, and Evelyn knew, without checking, that it wouldn't open again. She stood in the hallway, bathed in red light from the warped, stained glass window. Every breath she took felt heavier, as if the air had thickened into something her lungs weren't built to handle. The door at the end of the hall remained open a sliver, the light beneath it now flickering like a candle on the edge of burning out. For a few heartbeats, nothing happened. Then the house exhaled. It came from the walls, from the floorboards, from the ceiling above her head, one long, low breath that pushed a warm, sour wind past her ears. It smelled like spoiled milk and copper. She gagged and staggered forward, trying to escape it, only to hear the staircase behind her groan to life. She turned, it was back. The stairs had returned, but they weren't the same. The steps looked wet, their angles crooked and uneven, as if they'd grown there instead of being built. They pulsed faintly, like veins beneath rotting skin, and she couldn't tell if they led down to the first floor or somewhere else entirely. She should have stayed where she was. But the pressure in the hallway was growing. The walls seemed to lean inward now, just slightly, like they were listening, or inching closer. That red glow cast sharp, trembling shadows behind every corner, and one of them had begun to move. Not shift, not dance with the light, move with purpose, dragging itself forward. The sound it made was awful, like teeth grinding over stone. The staircase, no matter how wrong it looked, was the only escape. Evelyn ran. Her foot landed on the first step, and it shuddered. A low groan rumbled beneath her, as though she'd woken something. But it held. She took the next step, then the next, moving quickly but carefully, each motion shaky. The flashlight still dead in her hand. The stairwell was dark, but her eyes had adjusted enough to make out the shapes. Barely. Until she reached the bottom. Except it wasn't the first floor. It wasn't anywhere she recognized. The room before her was too large. Far too large. Bigger than the house itself should allow. The ceiling arched impossibly high overhead, vanishing into black. The air was colder here, and it smelled of stone and rot. There were no windows, no light sources, yet she could see everything. The floor was covered in strange symbols. Circles within circles, sharp angles curling into each other, some drawn in chalk, others carved directly into the wood. At the center of it all stood a tall mirror, old, cracked in the corners, and framed in tarnished gold. She stared into it. Her reflection stared back. At first, it looked normal. Her own wide eyes, her trembling mouth, the sweat slicking her hair to her face. Then the reflection blinked, and she didn't. Evelyn froze. The reflection smiled. It lifted its hand and waved, slow and mockingly. Her limbs locked. Fear pinned her in place as the mirror began to shimmer. The image of herself blurred, melted, became something darker. Black eyes widening to impossible sizes, mouth stretching far beyond human anatomy. Until the thing in the glass pressed its hands to the surface, and the mirror flexed outward like water about to spill. She stumbled back. The symbols beneath her feet lit up, red lines flaring to life one by one, tracing paths through the floor like veins igniting. A hum filled the space, low and ancient, vibrating deep in her bones. The thing in the mirror spoke, but not with a voice, with a presence. A feeling that filled her skull, pressing against her thoughts until they weren't fully hers anymore. You never left, you only forgot. But we remember, we always remember. The room began to shake. Dust and debris fell from the invisible ceiling above. Evelyn backed into a column. How had she not noticed the stone columns lining the walls before? Each one was carved with faces. Not statues. Faces. Dozens of them. Screaming, some smiling, others sleeping. As if they'd been buried alive within the stone. She turned to run, but the staircase was gone. Vanished. The doorway she'd come through now led to another hallway, narrow and slick with damp. It pulsed like a throat. She had no choice. She stepped into the hallway, gagging as the walls seemed to breathe around her. Each step made a soft squelch beneath her shoes. The floor was warm. The whispering returned. But now it was different. It said her name still, but not just hers. Other names. Some she remembered faintly from childhood, names of kids who used to live on Briar Lane. Neighbors who vanished over the years. Others were foreign, old names with sharp syllables that didn't fit any language she knew. She passed a room with a half-open door. She shouldn't have looked, but she did. Inside, a small boy sat on the floor, back to her, rocking gently. His skin was gray and thin, his hair matted. He turned his head halfway, and only halfway. It didn't look natural. As if the neck had broken long ago and healed wrong. "Play with me," he whispered, voice hoarse. She slammed the door shut and kept moving. The corridor ended at a new staircase, spiraling up. It looked newer, somehow untouched. The wood was pale and dry, the steps clean. She didn't trust it, but she climbed. Each step upward felt longer than the last. 5 stairs, then 10, then 20, 30, 40. She kept going. Her legs burned, breath came in short gasps. When she looked over the edge, she saw no bottom, only black. Finally, she reached the top. Another hallway. This one lit by flickering lanterns mounted on the wall. It resembled the top floor of the house, but wrong. The layout twisted. Angles didn't make sense. Some doors were upside down, others embedded in the ceiling. One door at the end stood out, tall, black, and carved with the same symbols from the floor below. Her instinct screamed. She reached for the doorknob. Before her hand touched it, the lanterns blew out one by one, as if exhaling flame. Darkness. Then a woman's voice, soft, familiar. "Evelyn, my sweet girl." She froze. That voice had haunted her dreams for years. Her mother. But her mother had died in a hospital bed 3 years ago. Evelyn turned, and there she stood, pale, beautiful, untouched by time. But her eyes were all wrong, all black, and she was floating. No footsteps, no weight, just hovering slightly above the ground, lips curled into a smile that split far too wide. "You came back," she said. "You always belonged to the house." Evelyn screamed and turned the knob, shoving open the black door, tumbling through it. On the other side, sunlight. Real sunlight. The living room. Normal. Books on shelves. Clock ticking again. Door wide open. Had it all been a dream, a hallucination? She stepped out onto the porch. Birdsong. Trees rustling. A car passed by on the road. A couple glanced at her, confused but otherwise normal. Was it over? Had she fallen asleep, imagined the whole thing? She turned back to look at the house. The windows blinked. Not shimmered. Not reflected. Blinked. And behind the upstairs window, Marley watched her with hollow eyes. Smiling. The house was not done with her. It had just let her go. For now. The world outside didn't feel real. The sunlight was too warm, too soft. The breeze across Evelyn's skin felt manufactured, like a set piece built to calm her, a lie with blue skies and chirping birds. She stood on the porch, staring into that deceptive brightness, but her eyes kept drifting back to the upstairs window. Marley hadn't moved. She stood behind the glass like a pressed flower, her smile frozen, her eyes hollow, her presence impossible. Evelyn watched her, heart pounding in her chest, waiting for something. A twitch, a blink, some kind of shift that might explain her away as a trick of the light. But Marley didn't need to move. Her stillness was worse. That quiet smile didn't look like a child's welcome. It looked like a threat. Evelyn stepped backward off the porch. Gravel crunched underfoot. Her legs felt numb, rubbery, the aftermath of adrenaline leaving her body in a flood. She made it to her car and slid into the driver's seat, hand trembling as she twisted the key. The engine coughed, sputtered, then roared to life. She looked up one last time. The window was empty. Marley was gone. Evelyn drove. She didn't look back. The road out of Crestfall was lined with pine trees that grew too close together, their branches reaching toward the car as if trying to pull it back. The deeper she went, the more the sunlight seemed to fade. Clouds forming out of nowhere, muting the colors of the world. It wasn't until she passed the rusted "Thank you for visiting Crestfall" sign that she felt like she could finally breathe again. But it didn't last. That night, in the tiny apartment she called home 3 towns over, Evelyn sat awake on her couch, the television flickering in front of her, volume low, a glass of untouched wine in her hand. Every shadow in the room felt heavier. The hallway light buzzed, then dimmed. She hadn't turned it down. She hadn't touched anything. The shadows began to shift, not move, shift. Like they were stretching, watching. She sat perfectly still. The whispering returned, not from her ears, from behind her eyes. A low, slow breath across her thoughts. "We let you go. That doesn't mean you left. She dropped the wine glass. It shattered, the red spilling across the floor like blood. She didn't react. Her eyes were locked on the dark hallway just outside the living room. She hadn't left it open. She never left it open. Something moved across it. Fast, too fast to see, but it was there. She stood slowly, careful not to step on the glass, and crept toward the light switch. It didn't work. The buzzing grew louder, a deep electric hum beneath her skin, vibrating through her teeth. Then she heard her own voice, coming from the hallway. Singing, a song she didn't remember knowing. Soft, eerie, like a lullaby gone sour. Under the floor, behind the door, we wait. Forevermore, her knees buckled. She grabbed the wall to keep herself upright. The singing stopped. Now there was breathing. Something was in the hallway. Breathing in short, raspy gasps, like it had just learned how. She stepped back, every hair on her arms raised, her chest tight with panic. Then the TV went black. Not off, black. A flat, pulsing shade with no reflection. Then it flickered, once, and Evelyn saw the house. Not a photo, not footage, live. The house on Briar Lane, its shutters closed. Porch still leaning forward like it wanted to whisper again. And something in the top window. A face pressed to the glass. Not Marley. Her? Herself. Staring directly at her through the screen, eyes wide, mouth open in silent scream. Evelyn threw the remote. The screen cracked. Static hissed. But the image stayed. Her face still there. Still screaming. Then it blinked away. Gone. Just static. She sank to the floor, hands over her face, trying to catch her breath, trying to remind herself she had escaped. But something was wrong. She looked down at her arm. That same small black fingerprint from before had grown. Now it looked like a handprint. And it was spreading. That night, she didn't sleep. Not from fear, from watching. She could feel them now, the eyes, everywhere. In the window reflection. In the knots of the wooden floor. In the patterns of her bedsheets. Every time she blinked, the shadows moved closer. Every time she tried to turn the lights on, they flickered, buzzed, and died. By morning, she looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. But she had a plan. She couldn't run from the house. Not really. Whatever it was, it had followed her, and now it wasn't just watching. It was waiting. So she went to the county clerk's office. She needed answers. Records, history, anything. The clerk, an older man with watery eyes and a shaking hand, looked up when she gave him the address. Then he looked down again. Quickly. "You sure you want to pull that file?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "I used to live there." "No one lives there," he replied, almost like it was a reflex. She didn't answer. He brought her the file in a sealed envelope. As she opened it, dust billowed out. Too much for paper alone. She waved it away, coughing, and spread the documents across the table. Deed transfers, property records, a list of previous owners. Some names were blacked out, entire lines redacted. One pattern stood out. Every single owner had vanished. Not moved. The not sold. Vanished, one after another. The last name, Marley Eames, age 9, listed as owner. No record of parents, just her name. Acquired property through inheritance. Filed by the town under unusual circumstances. Evelyn stared at the paper. 9 years old. That was impossible. She flipped through the pages, finding an older document, barely legible under age and smudged ink. It was dated 1897. Same house. Same pattern. Same names. And at the bottom, a note in tight, frantic handwriting: "The house eats what it remembers. It forgets nothing. If you see yourself in the glass, run." Evelyn shoved the papers back into the envelope, heart slamming in her chest. The whispering had started again, not in her head, behind her. She turned fast. No one there. Just the door slowly swinging open. The clerk had left. The building was empty. The whispering grew louder. This time she could make out the words, "Don't look in the glass. Don't look in the glass. Don't." But it was too late. The hallway mirror outside the clerk's office caught her eye, and her reflection blinked first. She didn't mean to look. It was instinct. That half, second glance you take when you pass a mirror. But as her eyes met her reflection, the world seemed to still, the hum of lights overhead stuttering into silence. Her breath caught in her throat, and she knew instantly. This wasn't a normal mirror. This wasn't a reflection. It was something else staring back. It smiled. Slowly. Deliberately. But Evelyn hadn't smiled. The grin widened, cracked unnaturally across her face. The eyes were hers, but filled with something ancient and mean, as though they'd lived lifetimes more than she had. She watched, frozen, as her mirrored self lifted a hand and pressed it to the glass. Only, it didn't stop at the surface. The hand pushed through. A pale, trembling limb crept out from the silver. Fingernails like cracked bones scraped against the frame. Evelyn stumbled backward, but her body didn't feel like hers anymore. Her arms moved slower. Her knees buckled too easily. The thing in the mirror kept crawling forward, torso now breaching the boundary, shoulders twisting unnaturally as it began to pull itself into the real world. She turned and ran, breath coming in jagged gasps, heart a ragged drumbeat in her ears. The hallway of the county clerk's office stretched ahead of her, but somehow it was longer than she remembered. Impossibly long, the doors multiplying on either side like cancer cells. She sprinted, not looking back, not daring to know how far the thing had come. The front door. She reached it, yanked it open, and stumbled into daylight. But it wasn't her daylight. The world outside was wrong. Muted colors, as though someone had drained all the warmth out of the sky. People walked the sidewalks, but none of them looked up. Their faces were expressionless, their motions mechanical. A man bumped into her and didn't react. She turned to apologize, and froze. His face was blank. Not in the metaphorical sense. His features were missing. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just a smooth stretch of flesh where a face should have been. She backed away, horrified, only to see more of them. Dozens. Hundreds. All walking in quiet, perfect lines. Expressionless heads turning at angles too sharp for bones to handle. And all of them seemed to bleed a soft, humming sound, like the static from an untuned television. It filled the air, worming into her ears, vibrating in her teeth. One of them stopped, turned toward her. No face, no eyes. Yet she knew it was looking. And then another turned. And another. Until the entire street of faceless figures had turned toward her, heads cocked like animals hearing something she could not. They began to walk, not rush, not charge. Walk, slow, steady, with footsteps that didn't make a sound. Evelyn ran. Her lungs burned, her vision blurred. The world seemed to bend around her. The buildings stretching taller, the sky splitting with long black cracks, as if reality itself was fracturing under the weight of her presence. She turned down an alley, ducked behind a dumpster, crouched low, chest heaving. Silence. For a moment she thought she'd escaped, until she saw the puddle at her feet begin to ripple. Not from movement, from breathing. The puddle was breathing. It expanded, contracted, then split apart with a hiss. From its center, a face began to form, hers again, mouth open in a silent scream, hands clawing upward from the liquid, eyes wide with something beyond fear. Then the whisper returned. This time, close. So close. You opened the glass, Evelyn. Now it sees you everywhere. She bolted back out of the alley, nearly tripping over her own feet. The faceless things were gone. The street was empty. No wind, no sound, not even birds. She needed help. Anyone. Something to ground her back into reality. She drove. She didn't remember getting in the car. But now she was gripping the wheel, speeding down a stretch of highway that looked familiar and foreign all at once. Her phone was dead. Every station on the radio was static. The sun overhead didn't move. She passed the same dead raccoon 3 times. It was rotting in a different position each time. On the 4th pass, its eyes opened. She screamed and swerved, tires shrieking as she spun off the road, landing in a ditch. Smoke rose from the hood. Her head slammed against the wheel, vision sparking white. She sat still, trying not to cry. A knock on the window startled her. She turned slowly. It was a child. A girl. 9 years old. Marley. Except this wasn't the Marley she remembered. Not the one she used to play with. Not the burned husk she saw in the flames. This Marley was clean. Unaged. She wore a simple white dress and stood barefoot in the ditch. Mud caking her toes, her expression blank. "You're in the wrong place," she said, voice flat. Evelyn rolled the window down, blinking tears away. "What do you mean? Where am I?" Marley leaned in close. "You didn't leave. You're still in the house. That's not possible. I walked out. I drove away." "You walked into the mirror," Marley said softly. "Not out the door." Evelyn's throat closed. "No. I saw the sky. I left." Marley tilted her head. "You left your body. But your shadow stayed behind. And now it's wearing you." Evelyn's hands began to tremble. She looked down. Her arms were too long, her fingers too thin. She touched her face and felt nothing. No skin. Just a smooth surface. No nose. No mouth. No eyes. And in the windshield's cracked reflection, Evelyn stared at the thing wearing her shape. Not her. Not anymore. She tried to scream. But the mirror doesn't let you scream. Not once it's taken your voice. Not once it's remembered who you are. It only breathes. And watches. And waits. She sat frozen behind the wheel, staring at the creature in the windshield's reflection, the wrong version of herself staring back. Its smile wasn't on her lips. It lived behind the eyes, a slow curl of something ancient trying on her face like a costume. Evelyn lifted a trembling hand and touched her cheek. The texture was there, skin, warmth. But it felt borrowed, like putting on someone else's clothes. Close enough to fool a mirror, but never quite right. She forced the car door open and stumbled into the ditch, the world spinning, her legs fighting to remember how to stand. Marley was still there, unmoving, watching her with that same unnerving calm. Mud clung to the girl's ankles like it had grown there. "I don't understand," Evelyn whispered. "How do I fix this?" "You don't," Marley replied. "You were warned." That letter. Too late. The sky above dimmed like someone had twisted a dial. A thin whine began to grow in the air, low at first, then rising, not loud, but deep, like it vibrated in her teeth. Evelyn pressed her hands to her ears. It didn't help. The sound wasn't coming through the world. It was coming from inside it. From inside her. She looked back toward the car, and the reflection was still there. Still her. Still not her. The thing blinked once, slow and mocking, and mouthed something silently. She squinted, heart hammering. "You are the guest now." Evelyn turned to Marley, frantic. "Then where is it?" "The thing wearing me. What is it doing?" Marley didn't answer. Instead, she pointed behind Evelyn. And Evelyn, against everything screaming inside her, turned to look. There, just beyond the road, standing in the tree line, was her body. It moved wrong. Too straight. Too steady. It walked slowly to the car, crouched beside the wreckage, and began sifting through the glass like it was looking for something. Carefully, deliberately, like it knew what to find. Evelyn called out, but no sound came. Her voice barely rasped in her own throat. Then, the thing wearing her body stood, turned around, and smiled in her direction, eyes black from corner to corner. It saw her. It knew where she was. But worse, it wasn't afraid. It walked away, calmly, confidently, as if it had places to be and people to fool, as if it had already fooled them. Evelyn ran. Her body didn't obey the way it used to. It felt sluggish, uncoordinated. Her legs didn't quite sync with her thoughts. She ran crooked, as if her muscles were still learning how to belong to her. Marley followed, barefoot and silent, eyes always on Evelyn, as though studying her reactions. They made it to the forest. The trees loomed above them, arms tangled like they were trying to block the sky. It should have been cold in the shadows, but the deeper Evelyn ran, the hotter the air became. Sweat soaked her back, plastered her hair to her skin. The birds weren't singing. The insects weren't chirping. The forest was dead quiet. Evelyn stopped, panting, and looked back. The world she'd left was gone. No road, no car, no ditch, only trees. She dropped to her knees. "This isn't real," she said, voice shaking. "None of this is real." "It's more than real," Marley answered. "The mirror doesn't show lies. It shows what hides under the skin." Evelyn wanted to scream, to punch something, to find whatever had done this to her and tear it apart with her hands. But Marley only tilted her head. "You were warned. The house, it tricked me." "No, it tested you. And you failed." Evelyn stood, gripping the nearest tree, bark biting into her palms. "Then tell me what to do. How do I get my body back?" Marley finally blinked. "Hey, just a reminder. If you haven't subscribed to my channel but story seems good, please take a moment to subscribe to my channel. It would be highly appreciated." Now back to the story. Marley finally blinked. It was the first human motion Evelyn had seen from her since she appeared. "There's only one way to take back what the house claims," she said. "You have to make it want to let go." Evelyn stared. "And how the hell do I do that?" Marley's voice dropped to a whisper. "You make it afraid." The words hung in the thick, hot air like smoke. "How do you scare something that's already inside you?" Evelyn asked, barely holding her panic down. "You give it something it didn't expect," Marley answered. "You remember." Evelyn blinked. "Remember what?" But Marley didn't answer. She vanished. Just gone. No footsteps. No sound. Just space where she had been. Evelyn turned in circles, calling her name, but it was no use. Alone again. Or not quite. A whisper drifted through the trees. Not her name. A place. Briar Lane. The house. It was calling her back. She didn't walk. She didn't follow a trail. She just moved, and the trees opened, and soon she was standing at the foot of that cracked stone path again. The house rose before her, just as she remembered. Only now it looked hungrier. Its windows wide and staring, its porch yawning. A single light burned inside. Her body was in there, wearing her face, living her life. And if Evelyn didn't stop it soon, it would forget it wasn't her. And so would everyone else. She stepped forward. The wind picked up, sharp and sour, dragging the scent of burnt paper and old rot into her lungs. She didn't care. She was going back in. But this time, she knew what waited. And it wouldn't be waiting for her. It would be ready. The house had changed. Not in structure. Its silhouette still loomed like a memory no one could fully forget, with its buckled porch and crooked shutters. But in atmosphere, it breathed deeper now, hungrier. The walls pulsed with a dull thrum, a rhythm just off from a human heartbeat, like something old was flexing beneath the wood. Evelyn stepped onto the first step of the porch, and the air thickened around her. Each inhale felt like she was breathing in ash. She hesitated at the door. Her hand hovered near the knob, fingers trembling. Inside, her body walked and talked and smiled with her teeth. It was touching her things, saying words that used to belong to her. She gritted her jaw and pushed the door open. It didn't creak, it sighed. The moment she crossed the threshold, the world behind her blinked out. No wind, no sky, no porch, just a flat wall of blackness. The house had her again. This time it wasn't pretending to be real. The light in the living room was dim, golden, almost soft, but nothing inside felt safe. The bookshelves were empty now, every book gone. The clock ticked, but the rhythm was wrong. Slower, like it was trying to lull her into forgetting time altogether. And the smell, stronger now, a mix of rotted wood, damp earth, and something metallic, blood or rust, or both. Evelyn stepped further in, her hands clenched at her sides. "Where are you?" she called out. Her voice echoed too far, bouncing off angles that didn't make sense. "You stole my body. You don't get to keep it," a voice answered from the kitchen, "but it fits so well." She turned slowly. Her body stood there, perfect, alive, smiling. It wore her like a silk dress, with ease, with elegance. Every movement smooth, practiced, like it had studied her through 1,000 reflections. It walked toward her barefoot, leaving no footprints, though Evelyn could hear the boards creak. I made it better, it said. You wore it like a cage. I wear it like a crown. Evelyn clenched her fists. Give it back. You never knew what to do with it. You wasted it on fear, on guilt, on silence. I can do so much more. Then why are you still afraid of me? Evelyn snapped. The thing tilted her head. I'm not afraid. Yes, you are, Evelyn said, stepping forward. Because I remember. The smile slipped. Just for a second, but she saw it. I remember the night I first saw you, Evelyn said. I was 9. Marley had taken me up to the attic. Said it was a secret room. The air was cold, but there were no windows. Just mirrors. All of them cracked. She said we could see ourselves if we looked hard enough. The thing shifted, no longer speaking. She went first, Evelyn whispered. Stared too long. Then she screamed. And something pulled her in. The body in front of her stayed still. She never made it out, Evelyn said, and I told myself I imagined it. That the fire took her. That no one could get pulled into a mirror. But I knew. Deep down, I always knew. Her voice trembled now. You weren't born from me. You were born from her. From her screaming reflection. You wore her first. And now you wear me. But you don't belong here. The thing wearing Evelyn stepped forward, eyes dull and endless. You remember too much. Exactly, Evelyn said, lifting her chin. And you hate that. You feed on forgetting. On the cracks in memory. But I remember everything. The house moaned. The walls quivered. The floor beneath her shifted. Subtly at first, then violently. The room stretched sideways like the space was gasping. The ceiling dropped, then rose again, like it didn't know where it belonged. The house was fighting her memory. Fighting her truth. You think you're in control. Evelyn said, shouting now over the rising groans. You've built a lie inside my skin. But I've walked through your halls. I've seen your mirrors. I know what you really are. The copy of her body screamed. It was a piercing, inhuman sound. Something shrill and rattling, like glass grinding against bone. It rushed her arms out, face distorted with fury. But Evelyn didn't move. The thing passed through her. Literally. It sliced through her body like mist, and vanished. The living room was empty. Still, silent. Then the walls began to shake. Bookshelves burst into flame without fire. The clock melted down the wall like wax. The floor rolled, splitting into fissures, each crack filled with a pulsing red light from below. The house was collapsing, not from damage, but from panic. She walked toward the staircase. Each step up was harder, not from weight, but resistance. The house didn't want her there. Not now. Not when she remembered the attic. She climbed, ignoring the walls as they rippled, ignoring the voices screaming from within the floor. She reached the second level, turned left, and faced the attic door at the end of the hall, the same door from when she was 9, peeling white paint. A rusted knob, no lock. She grabbed it and pulled. The stairs unfolded upward. Wind roared down from the attic, cold and wet and full of 100 whispered names, hers among them. She climbed. The attic wasn't an attic anymore. It was a room made entirely of glass. Not mirrors, just reflections, floor to ceiling. Infinite copies of herself, stretching in every direction. Each one a little different. One smiled with teeth too sharp. Another wept blood. Another wore Marley's face. But at the center of it all stood the real mirror. The first mirror, tall, framed in scorched gold, its surface swirling like smoke under glass. And within it, her body, waiting, watching. Evelyn stepped up to it. The reflection looked at her. No mimicry this time. It stared like it knew this was the end. She lifted her hand and touched the surface. Cold, it sucked at her skin. Her reflection lifted its hand too. But it wasn't smiling anymore. It looked afraid. Too late, Evelyn whispered. And pushed. The glass shattered inward. The mirror screamed, and Evelyn fell through. Evelyn didn't crash or land or even slow down. She fell. Into a space that wasn't space, a void shaped like memory, time, and sound. But none of those things functioned here the way they were supposed to. There was no air, no gravity, no up or down. and yet her body tumbled through it, dragged by unseen currents that felt intentional. This wasn't chaos. It was guided. Flashes erupted in the dark as she plunged deeper, snippets of her life, like memories torn loose and forced to play out again. She saw her mother, frail and pale in that hospital bed, mouth moving but no sound escaping. She saw herself at age 12, eyes wide in terror, staring at something in the corner of her bedroom that everyone told her wasn't there. She saw her own funeral. Closed casket. The realization clawed at her brain. Was she dead? Had this always been death, wearing the mask of a house? Or was this something worse, something older than death, that used memory like thread and flesh like fabric? The fall finally slowed, not because she hit anything, but because the space around her tightened. It pressed inward, shrinking, folding until she was standing, suddenly upright, heart pounding, lungs burning with air she hadn't known she was missing. The space had changed. Or maybe she had. She was in a room. Not a room like one, a room that knew it was a room. Stone walls, no door, no windows. A single mirror on the far side, tall and wide, and still dripping with the smoke of her fall. And standing beside it was Marley. She wasn't 9 anymore. She wasn't burned or ghostly or twisted by time. She was a teenager now, maybe 16, the age she should have been if she'd lived. She wore a black dress and stood barefoot on the cold stone, her hair longer, her expression unreadable. "You made it," she said softly, as if Evelyn had arrived late to something inevitable. "What is this place?" Evelyn asked, her voice raw. Marley didn't answer right away. She walked to the mirror, laid her palm against it, and the surface rippled like water. "This is where the house keeps everything it doesn't want the world to see," she said. "Memories, shadows, people." Evelyn swallowed. "So it's a prison?" "No," Marley said. "A garden." Evelyn's breath hitched. Marley turned to face her, eyes solemn. "The house doesn't kill people, not the way you think. It plants them, buries them in mirrors, grows them into something else." Evelyn shook her head. "That thing wearing me, it came from here." Marley nodded. "It grew inside you, like a seed. From the moment you looked into the mirror that night. It's been waiting ever since. But I fought it. I remembered." Evelyn insisted. "I pushed it out." Marley stepped closer. "That's why you're here." "What do you mean?" "You didn't defeat it," she said. "You traded places." Evelyn froze. "No," she whispered. "No, You're on the wrong side of the glass," Marley said gently. And then Evelyn understood. She wasn't in her body anymore. She was the reflection. The thing wearing her, it hadn't vanished. It had won. It had taken over fully, stepped out into her life, and Evelyn had been pulled in to replace it. She was the image now. The shadow, the echo. "No," Evelyn said again, louder. "I can't. This isn't. There has to be a way back." Marley looked at her with pity. "There might be. But it costs something." "What?" Marley hesitated. "You have to find the room where the house forgets." Evelyn frowned. "I thought the house never forgets." Marley stepped backward into the wall and vanished, her voice echoing as if it had been swallowed by the stones exactly. Evelyn turned in a slow circle. The mirror behind her had gone dark. The stone walls pulsed with that familiar thrum again, the heartbeat of the house. She walked toward where Marley had stood, pressed her hand to the wall. Nothing. Cold, dead rock. Then something whispered from behind her ear. "Left." She turned sharply. No one. Again. Closer this time. "Left." She faced the left wall, hesitated, and stepped toward it. The stone shimmered and split. A hallway unfurled. Long. Narrow. Lit by oil lamps that flickered blue. She walked. The air grew thicker the deeper she went. The walls closed in tighter. Her footsteps echoed weirdly, as if the sound looped before bouncing back to her. She passed doors. None had handles. Some wept water. One sobbed. Another blood. She didn't stop. Finally, she reached a door that was nothing. No frame. No wood. Just absence. A black rectangle suspended in space, humming softly. She stepped through, and found herself in a vast room made entirely of paper. Ceiling, floor, walls, all covered in documents, pages, notes, each one scrawled with names, events, dates, some torn, some burned, all moving gently as if touched by wind that didn't exist. It was a record, a memory vault, the house's mind, and in the center was a desk. At the desk sat a person, or something that once had been a person. Its back was turned, bones poked through parchment, thin skin. Fingers scribbled endlessly with a quill that bled black instead of ink. Names, always names, over and over. Evelyn stepped closer. The figure stopped writing. It spoke without turning. "You don't belong here. I need to be forgotten," Evelyn said, her voice steadier than she felt. The figure paused. "No one asks for that. I do." "Why?" "Because I remember. Because the thing that stole me is still walking in my skin. And as long as the house remembers me, it has something to hold on to." Silence. "Then you would become nothing." Evelyn's throat tightened. "Then at least it can't become me." The figure turned. Its face was Evelyn's, but older, worn, hollow-eyed and sorrowful. "This is what forgetting costs," it said. "Are you sure?" Evelyn stepped forward and touched the desk. "Yes." The house screamed, and the paper world burned. It started at her fingertips, a soft, aching warmth that spread like ink in water, soaking into her skin, her bones, her memory. The flames didn't erupt with violence. They unfolded. Pages ignited in slow motion curls, shedding glowing ash like falling snow. The parchment walls, heavy with names and whispered stories, crumbled into themselves one by one. Evelyn stood at the center of it, arms slack, eyes wide. Not in fear, but in understanding. This was not fire meant to destroy. This was fire meant to erase. The figure at the desk, her older self, her possible self, looked up one final time as the flames reached her chair. "Once it's gone," she said, voice distant. "There's no finding it again." "Are you certain?" Evelyn didn't answer. She only closed her eyes. Because deep down, she was certain of one terrible truth: if she didn't give up her place in the house's memory, she would never truly be free. The thing that had taken her skin, her voice, her life, it thrived in remembrance, in being known. So long as she existed in the mind of the house, it could keep wearing her like a mask that never cracked. But if the house forgot her, then maybe it would forget what it had stolen. Her body burned last. She felt it, not as pain, but as lightness. Her hands dissolved into embers. Her feet scattered like dandelion seeds. The flames took her voice without a scream, and for the first time since she entered Briar Lane, she felt peace. No whispers, no weight pressing behind her thoughts, only warmth. Then came the silence. Total, clean, a silence that rang like a bell in her skull. And when she opened her eyes again, she wasn't in the house. She was nowhere. A white void. Not bright, not dark. Just endless, empty. She stood whole but wrong, as if she existed in outline only. Her fingers passed through her own body like mist. No sound, no weight, no breath. And yet, she was not alone. From the horizon, if it could be called that, a shape emerged. Not walking, not gliding. It simply became closer. The thing wore her body. Still perfect, still her smile, her eyes. But now the face was confused. It blinked. It looked around. Something had changed. "You," it whispered, the first sound in the void. Evelyn faced it without fear. "You feel it, don't you?" she said. The thing's mouth twitched. "What did you do?" "I made you invisible," she said. "You can't." "I did. I made the house forget me." "Which means it forgot you." It took a step forward, but faltered. Not physically, but fundamentally. Like its existence had slipped sideways. The hands it had stolen curled into trembling fists. "You don't understand how old I am," it hissed. "I do," she said calmly. "But old things still rot. They just need to be forgotten first." The void around them began to fray. The whiteness cracked like porcelain, revealing gaps, holes in reality. Through them, Evelyn saw flickers of the house, the real world, time and space she no longer belonged to. Her body, shape began to blur, and so did the thing wearing her, its face smeared like paint in the rain. You've doomed us both, it spat. No, she said. I've freed us both. The void cracked wider, and the thing screamed. This wasn't a scream of rage. It wasn't even fear. It was loss, a howling of something old and clever realizing it had been erased. And, as it screamed, it shrank. Not in size, but in presence. Its color dulled. Its eyes went blank. Its fingers fell away like dust on a forgotten shelf. And then, with a soft sigh, it was gone. Evelyn stood alone again. Only now, the cracks weren't just showing the world. They were pulling her toward it. She tried to resist. But her body, her form, wasn't whole. The house had forgotten her. So had the mirrors. So had the reflections. There was no anchor left to drag her back. She didn't exist anymore. Not really. And yet something stirred, a sound, faint, familiar. A lullaby, her mother's voice, singing, off, key, soft, under the floor. Behind the door, Evelyn turned. And for the first time, she saw the outline of a new mirror, not in the house, not in any room she'd ever seen, but floating in the void. On the other side was a child, her, young, maybe 7, sitting in the grass, smiling, untouched by the house. Before, she reached out, not to escape, not to return, but to remember, just one final time. Her fingers touched the glass, and the world went black. A heartbeat passed, then another, and then a voice, soft, confused, from a hospital bed. Miss Harrow, Evelyn, can you hear me? She opened her eyes, real ones. Light burned overhead. The scent of antiseptic filled her nose. Her tongue felt heavy, her limbs weak. A nurse stood beside her. You've been in a coma for almost a week, he said gently. She blinked. He smiled. Welcome back. But deep inside, Evelyn wasn't smiling. Because even though she'd returned, even though the mirror was gone, even though the house had forgotten, she hadn't. And something inside her still whispered at night. Something with her face. Still waiting. Still watching. For someone to look too long into the wrong glass. Hospitals are supposed to feel sterile. Safe. But even as the machines beeped rhythmically and nurses bustled past with polite smiles, Evelyn couldn't shake the sense that something was off. It wasn't the lighting, though it was harsh. It wasn't the food, though it tasted like wet cardboard. It was the silence. The wrong kind. Like the walls were holding their breath. She'd only been awake for a few hours, but already the world felt too bright, too loud, too unreal. Her skin didn't sit right. Every movement sent a tiny pulse through her body, like a second rhythm beneath her heartbeat. A memory pressing against her bones. She'd left the house. She had broken the mirror. She'd watched that thing dissolve in the void. And yet, something still moved in the corners of her mind. They called it a coma. 7 days without response. Monitors flat, pupils dilated but reactive. She had no bruises, no broken bones. Just an unexplained, prolonged silence. The doctors called it a neurological event. They said her brain shut down under intense psychological trauma. But they didn't see the black smear that slid across the mirror when she passed the bathroom. They didn't feel the chill under her skin when she looked into her reflection. They didn't hear her name whispered from behind the glass when the lights flickered. She didn't tell them. Not because she didn't want to. Because she knew they wouldn't believe her. The house had forgotten her. She was sure of that. But forgetting doesn't mean forgiving. It doesn't mean free. It means loose, uninsured, and something had slipped out with her. The first night in the hospital, it visited her. She woke at 3:12 a.m., not from sound, from absence. The noise of the hospital, beeping monitors, faint footsteps, rolling carts, had vanished. The room was still, dead still, and she was not alone. The silhouette stood at the foot of her bed, not a nurse, not a person, a shape, tall, wrong, as if it had been made from pieces of other shadows. It had no face, but Evelyn knew it was looking at her. She couldn't speak, couldn't move, only watch as it leaned forward impossibly slow and whispered without lips, "You left the door open." Then it was gone. No sound, no movement. Just not there anymore. The next morning, the nurses found her blood pressure dangerously low, her skin clammy, her eyes dilated. They thought it was a reaction to medication. Adjusted her dosage. Increased observation. But Evelyn knew better. It hadn't been a dream. It had been a reminder, and it wasn't the last one. The second time it came, it brought a mirror. She was wheeled into a recovery room, a private space with a window view meant to give her quiet. But the first thing she noticed wasn't the bed or the books or even the faint scent of lavender from the diffuser in the corner. It was the full-length mirror on the far wall. She asked them to cover it. The nurse looked puzzled but obliged. Still, that night, the sheet had fallen. She awoke to see her own reflection standing upright while she was still lying down, watching, grinning, mouthing words she couldn't hear. Evelyn turned her face to the wall and didn't look again. By the third visit, she'd stopped reacting. The shadows knew it. They tried new games. A photograph on her table showed her smiling with people she didn't recognize. A flower vase that never wilted no matter how many days passed. One nurse, the only one with eyes a shade too black, who never blinked when she spoke. She kept quiet. But her fingers trembled beneath the blankets. She started to dream again. But they weren't dreams. They were memories, not hers, but someone else's. She saw through the eyes of the thing that wore her, watched it step into her apartment, watched it brush its teeth in her bathroom, watched it answer calls from old friends, perfectly mimicking her laugh. She saw its hands on her doorknob, its smile in the glass, and in every dream there was one moment where the reflection in the mirror glitched, smiled too long, blinked too slow, twitched. The cracks were forming, and it knew it. Evelyn wasn't gone, not completely. Some piece of her still clung to the edges of the life it had stolen. It wasn't over. It was waiting. Then came the letter. No envelope. Just a folded note left on her food tray. One sentence, shaky and rushed, "You've been seen." She looked around the room. The camera in the corner blinked green. The hallway outside was empty. That night, she stood in front of the mirror. On purpose. The reflection smiled, waited. Evelyn lifted a finger, traced the words onto the fogged surface. "I remember." The smile faltered. A flicker, a twitch, a glitch. It was still wearing her face, but the cracks were deeper now. Because even though the house had forgotten her, she never forgot herself, and she was coming back. One reflection at a time. It began with cracks, tiny fractures in her reflection, barely visible at first, like hairline splits in old porcelain. Evelyn saw them not just in the mirror in her hospital room, but in every surface that dared reflect her image, the glossy metal of a lunch tray, the black screen of the turned-off television, the wet glisten of her eyes in the window at night, and each time she looked, those cracks deepened. Subtle, yes, but deliberate. A spider web of tension building across the barrier between what was hers and what had been taken. She didn't tell the nurses anymore when strange things happened. What would be the point? The moment she asked about the unfamiliar faces in the hallway. The ones that walked too quietly and blinked too slowly. They exchanged glances and scribbled notes behind clipboards. Their kindness began to take on an edge, a form of detachment, like they were waiting for her to collapse back into the coma she'd crawled out of. But Evelyn didn't collapse. She watched, and she waited. Because the cracks weren't just signs, they were invitations. It started in the mirror. Again. This time she was brushing her teeth, staring blankly at herself in the bathroom mirror, the fluorescent lights above flickering with that familiar offbeat rhythm, as if reality stuttered in the presence of truth. Her reflection moved in syncs until it didn't. It paused, a fraction of a second late, a breath caught behind glass. Evelyn didn't flinch. She stared, slowly raising her hand. Her reflection hesitated, then copied, but the hand it raised was burned. Only for a second, charred skin, blackened nails. Fingers curled like claws. Then, normal again. But Evelyn had seen it. The mirror was showing what hid beneath. "You're slipping," she said softly, her breath fogging the glass. The lights buzzed louder. "You can't hold me forever." The reflection smirked. Not angry, not afraid, amused. And then it whispered, "Without sound, try me." She slammed her palm against the mirror. It rippled, like the surface of a pond disturbed by a stone. Only here, the ripples moved inward, deeper, like they were being pulled from the other side. The mirror trembled. The cracks spread wider. She felt it, a pull behind her navel, an ache in her skull, like her very soul had leaned forward without permission. Then the door banged open behind her, and the connection shattered. A nurse, wide-eyed. "Miss Harrow, everything okay?" Evelyn turned, forcing a smile. "Yeah, just dropped my toothbrush." The nurse left after a moment, still frowning, and Evelyn sat on the bed, shaking. She stared at her hands. They were starting to flicker. Not visibly, not yet, but she could feel it. Like her skin was shifting between two frequencies, two identities, flickering between what she was and what she had been turned into. The cracks weren't just growing in the mirror. They were growing in her. That night, it wasn't the house that called to her. It was the thing. The one still wearing her shape, still walking her life. She saw it again in the dream, that same vivid, lucid nightmare that left her breathless and sweating every time. The imposter stood in her old bedroom. Same curtains, same creaky floorboards, same diary on the nightstand. It looked at her through the mirror. And this time, it spoke aloud. "You keep scratching at the walls," it said, "but you're scratching from the wrong side." Evelyn didn't answer. She was done being afraid. "You forgot something," the thing continued. "You may have forced the house to forget you, but there's still one place you left a mark." "What are you talking about?" It smiled. "Marley." The name hit her like ice water down the spine. "You gave something to her," it said, "a piece of you, and in return, she kept you remembered. Even now, she remembers." Evelyn's breath caught. That moment in the void. The child, the lullaby, the final touch on the mirror. She had reached for Marley not out of fear, but instinct. Connection. The kind you don't sever with fire or time. "She never let go," the imposter said, almost gently, "which means the door you closed. You also left unlocked." Evelyn's eyes snapped open. She was back in the hospital bed, drenched in sweat, heart pounding. Her hands tingled with a strange heat. On the tray beside her lay a piece of paper, blank. Until it wasn't. Words crawled up from invisible ink, one line at a time. "She remembers you." We all do. And beneath it, a location. A street name she hadn't heard in over a decade. Denton's Hollow. It wasn't near Crestfall. It was beneath it. A place buried not by time, but by secrecy. It was where the mirrors were made. Evelyn tore the paper, flushed the pieces, and by morning, she was gone. Out of the hospital. Out of the city. Disappeared without discharge, without farewells. She didn't tell anyone. She didn't need to. The reflection would feel it the moment she crossed the town line. Because Evelyn wasn't hiding anymore. She was going back. Not to take her life back. Not even to destroy what wore her skin. She was going to Denton's Hollow to finish what the fire didn't. And this time, she wouldn't be crawling back through glass. She'd be breaking it. Denton's Hollow wasn't on any map. Evelyn had checked. Twice. Old state atlases, digitized surveys, even the dusty wall-mounted reliefs at the Crestfall Library. Nothing. Just a sliver of faded woodland where the terrain dropped off into marsh and fog. Locals didn't talk about it. If she asked, they either stared blankly or changed the subject. The only ones who reacted visibly were the oldest residents, and even they just whispered one word before turning away buried. It took her most of a day to reach it. The road ended 3 miles short, swallowed by forest thick with pine and silence. The deeper she walked, the quieter everything became. The air itself seemed muffled, like she was passing through layers of cotton. Even her breathing lost its sound. No birds, no insects, Not even the wind. Just the crunch of leaves beneath her feet, and then not even that. The trees opened without warning. A clearing. Dead center a town that wasn't supposed to be there. Small, sunken, hunched like it was ashamed of existing. No signs. No gates. The buildings leaned at odd angles, overgrown with ivy that looked more like veins than plant life. Roofs dipped in like soft skulls. Windows were boarded, bricked, or worse, covered with mirrored glass, dulled by age but still watching. Denton's Hollow. The place where the house's memory had come from. Evelyn's stomach twisted, but she kept walking. The ground sloped downward as she entered the main street, her boots slipping slightly in the mud. The sky overhead dimmed unnaturally. Not clouds. Not weather. Just darkness. Like something was slowly drawing a curtain over the sun. The first building on her right was a church, or what had once been one. The steeple had long since crumbled, and the heavy double doors stood ajar. Something inside scraped against the floorboards. Evelyn didn't stop. She didn't need to. The sound followed her. Soft dragging steps that echoed without source. She passed a barber shop, a post office, an abandoned store that still had Keldrum KS painted in sun, bleached lettering on the window. All the glass was wrong, warped, dark, reflective when it shouldn't be. Every single pane showed her reflection, and every single reflection was different. In one, she smiled too wide. In another, her eyes were gone. One showed her soaked in blood. She didn't flinch. Not anymore. It was the building at the far end of the hollow that called to her. A house. Not the house, but close. A smaller, older version. The prototype. The windows were not windows. They were silvered holes. There was no door, only a narrow opening that pulsed faintly like the throat of something living. The porch was sunken and warped, and etched into the wood were rows and rows of names, carved in desperate, uneven strokes. Some had been scratched out. Others were half finished, as if the person hadn't lived long enough to complete their own inscription. At the center of the porch was one name Evelyn recognized. Marley Eames. She exhaled, stepped forward, and crossed the threshold. Inside, the air was thicker than any she'd breathed before. It moved in slow waves, dense and humid, like something exhaled from a deep place underground. The interior was endless. The moment she crossed the opening, the space stretched. Rooms unfolded where there shouldn't be space. Halls twisted into staircases that led nowhere and then back again. Every surface shone like glass under her gaze, but when she blinked, it vanished. This wasn't a house. It was a mirror maze, not of glass, of memory. She took a step. The floor beneath her whispered Evelyn. Another step. Still watching. Another. Still wearing. The voice came from everywhere. It bled from the walls, curled from the ceiling beams, bubbled up from beneath the floorboards. And though it was a chorus of many, the center of the voice was unmistakably hers. Not hers now. Hers then. The girl she used to be. Why did you leave us? The voice asked. She didn't answer. She walked. She passed a mirror showing a childhood bedroom. Her mother asleep on the couch. A birthday cake half eaten, wax melting in perfect drips. These weren't illusions. They were exact. Not memories, but replicas. Places the house had stolen from her mind. The next mirror showed Marley, younger, standing alone in the attic, holding something in her hands. A broken shard. A piece of the first mirror. She was crying, whispering. I didn't mean to call them. Evelyn stopped cold. She moved closer to the image, her breath catching. Marley's lips trembled. I just wanted to know what was on the other side. And the shard in her hands, it pulsed. A shape formed behind her, tall, crooked, smiling. Evelyn reached toward the mirror. The image dissolved. A door appeared where the mirror had been. She opened it. Inside was a circular room. At the center, a well. No rope. No bucket. Just a hole surrounded by hundreds of mirror fragments embedded in the walls. Some flat. Some curved. None intact. And above the well, suspended midair, was her body, limp, eyes closed, wearing a hospital gown, still. And above it, clinging to the ceiling like a spider in its web, the thing, not wearing her anymore. Its face was blank, its skin shifting between forms. But it looked unfinished, incomplete. It turned slowly, eyes like fractures, and it spoke. "You left a door open," it hissed. "Now the house is hungry again." Evelyn stepped forward, no longer afraid. She knew what this was. The core, the feeding heart. The room where the house drank from memory and spit out monsters. The place where it copied people, and where it kept them once they were hollowed. She stared up at her floating body, then at the thing. "I'm not your meal," she said quietly. "I'm your mistake." And she jumped into the well. Evelyn fell into silence. Not the kind that calms, but the kind that seems to scream just beneath the surface, an absence so total it hums. The well didn't feel like falling through air or water or even time. It felt like descending through thought, as though the space she dropped through was built from forgotten prayers and half-remembered nightmares. There was no wind, no motion, no sense of descent, and yet she was plummeting faster than anything she'd ever known. Images flickered around her, not visions, but slices, memory shards, her third-grade teacher's perfume, the sound of Marley humming under her breath, the exact feel of the hospital sheets twisted around her ankle that one morning when she'd first noticed the mirror grinning. These weren't memories offered, they were taken. The house wasn't done with her yet. It was still chewing. She hit the bottom without warning, no impact, just stopped. She was standing on what she didn't know. The space was blacker than dark, but not empty. Shapes loomed, vast, towering things too far to comprehend. They didn't move. They waited, like watchers behind a curtain, holding their breath, curious if she'd noticed them. She tried to speak. No sound came out. Not because her voice was gone, because the rules were different here. This wasn't the world. This wasn't the house. This was the root. The tap buried so deep under time and story that it no longer remembered what it was pretending to be. And in the center of it, the mirror. Whole, tall as a cathedral door, its frame was alive, not metaphorically, alive, pulsing, breathing, lined with veins that bulged and moved beneath silver bone. It stood in silence, drawing her forward not with threat but with need. As if it missed her. As if it had always missed her. She walked to it compelled. Her own reflection waited on the surface, but not as she looked now. Younger, maybe 12. The age before she stopped being able to sleep without lights on. Before Marley's screams in the attic. Before the shadows in the mirror began to follow her out of the room. This version of her smiled. The expression was kind, almost warm, but the eyes weren't hers, they were its. And then the reflection stepped out, not in violence. In sympathy, it took her hand, held it, whispered, "You were always meant to come back." Evelyn tried to pull away, but her limbs were slow here, sluggish, like the air had thickened to tar. The thing leaned close, pressing its forehead to hers, eyes still locked onto hers, wide and loving. "You don't have to fight anymore," it said. "Just let go. I'll wear the pain. I'll carry the memory." And for one awful second, it didn't seem like a lie. It seemed like a relief, to let the house take it all, to forget, to sink. But then a sound cracked through the dark, sharp, piercing, humming, a child's voice, off key, familiar. Under the floor, behind the door, Evelyn's eyes widened. Marley. She looked past the mirror being, and saw another figure walking toward them from the dark, small, barefoot, and real. Not a memory, not a trick, Marley, but different. Older now, solid, not burned, not warped. She was holding something in her hands, the mirror shard, still intact, still bleeding its faint silver light. Evelyn tore free of the mirror. Things gripped and stumbled toward the girl. The being hissed behind her. "You can't." "You're part of us now." Marley raised the shard. The darkness recoiled from the light, and Evelyn understood. This wasn't a piece of the mirror. This was the first break. The original wound. The one Marley caused when she first looked too long. when she whispered into the glass, when something on the other side heard her. It wasn't just a shard, it was a key. And Marley, whatever she had become, had kept it all this time. "I kept you alive," the girl said, her voice trembling, "even when you didn't want to be." Evelyn reached for the shard. As soon as her fingers closed around it, the entire void screamed. The mirror shattered, not physically, but foundationally. The space cracked. The watchers in the dark moaned in disappointment or rage, maybe both. Evelyn didn't hesitate. She plunged the shard into her own chest, not to end herself, to anchor. The pain was instant, blinding. And then, everything snapped. Light roared through the dark, not soft or gentle, but violent, like a dam breaking. The house reeled. The false memory space buckled and folded inward, and she was rising, fast. Up through the well, up through the glass, up through the burning spine of the house. And when she opened her eyes, she was back, in her body, her real one, on the porch of Briar Lane. Alone, hands shaking, breath ragged, but whole. Behind her, the house groaned, the windows shattered, the walls cracked, and from within, a long, echoing wail that didn't stop for minutes. It wasn't pain, it wasn't defeat, it was grief. It had lost her, for the first time, and it knew. Evelyn stood, blood still wet around the shard lodged at her heart. But she didn't remove it, because now she understood. The mirror might forget, but she never would, and that was how she would keep it caged. The blood didn't stop. It wasn't gushing or dramatic. It wasn't Hollywood. It seeped, steady, warm, rhythmic. The shard pulsed faintly in her chest like a second heart, its silvery edges half embedded in her skin, surrounded by a slow bloom of red. Evelyn should have collapsed, should have been choking on her own breath, clutching her ribs. But instead, she stood steady on the rotting porch of Briar Lane, her body humming with an energy both foreign and familiarly wrong. The wound didn't feel fatal. It felt like payment. The house behind her had gone still, not quiet, still. An unnatural calm, like a predator mid-blink. The shattered windows yawned like open mouths. The porch boards sagged beneath her, not from her weight, but from exhaustion. Whatever ancient intelligence nested inside that structure, whatever was left of its memory, its spite, it had lost its grip on her. But not its hunger. It would never stop feeding. And now it was bleeding through her. She walked down the porch steps slowly, the pain in her chest flaring with each heartbeat. With every footfall, a dull ringing echoed in her ears, like glass chimes played underwater. She should have walked away. She could have left. But something in her blood knew better. It was not finished. Something followed her out. Not the thing that once wore her skin. She'd seen that dissolve. No, this was subtler, quieter, a sleever, a whisper. A piece of the mirror that hadn't been shattered, one the house had buried so deep inside her that even she hadn't noticed. Until now, every surface she passed, puddles, car windows, storefronts, reflected her as she was pale, blood-stained, wide-eyed. But in each reflection, there was something else, a second shadow behind her, a sliver of movement in her eyes, a delay in her smile. The shard had done more than bring her back. It had opened her, and something had come through. She got as far as Crestfall's edge before her knees buckled. The ground was damp and soft beneath the overgrowth, swallowing her knees as she collapsed just short of the rusting town sign. Her fingers dug into the dirt. She retched, but nothing came up. Her stomach was empty. Her body didn't feel like it belonged entirely to her anymore. The pain came then, delayed, white, hot and laced with memory, not just hers, others. She saw flashes, dozens of them, faces she didn't recognize, voices shouting, crying, names scratched into wood. A woman falling through glass, a man screaming as something crawled from his mouth, a child whispering to a cracked mirror, again and again, "Please, take me instead." Every memory the house had consumed was now inside her, stored in the shard, spilling into her bloodstream. She pressed her palm to her chest, gasping, and felt the edge of the mirror fragment shift slightly beneath her skin. A part of her wanted to pull it out. Another part, the part that now spoke in dreams and shadows, knew that would kill her. Not just physically, completely. The shard wasn't just a piece of glass anymore. It was a lock, a seal. If she removed it, she wouldn't just die. She'd open again. And this time, the house would take everything. She sat there for hours, knees in the dirt, bleeding slowly as the afternoon dimmed. No one came. No cars, no passersby. The town, even in the sunlight, seemed suspended, an afterimage, not quite part of the world. By nightfall, she forced herself up and walked. Not back into Crestfall, not back to her apartment or the hospital, but toward the forest, toward Denton's Hollow. She knew what had to happen. The house had been built atop a place that wasn't just haunted. It was rooted in something older, a sickness beneath the ground, a well of memory too deep for most minds to survive. The mirror was never just a mirror. It was a door, and doors, when cracked, let more than just people pass through. Someone had to close it, not temporarily, forever. But she couldn't destroy it alone. She needed help, and there was only one person who had walked out of the void with her. Marley. Evelyn reached the edge of the hollow by dawn. The forest seemed thinner now, less oppressive, as if even the trees were exhausted. The crooked houses still leaned like broken teeth. Fog clung low over the ground. The same strange silence blanketed the air. But she didn't stop. She walked through the center of the ghost town until she reached the building. The prototype, the mirror maze that had started all of it. But it was gone, collapsed in on itself. Burned to black bone, only ashes remained. But in the center of those ashes stood Marley, barefoot, clutching the same mirror shard. Her eyes met Evelyn's, and neither of them needed to speak. They had the same look. Not grief, not fear, finality. Marley stepped forward and offered her the shard. "You brought it back," she said. "No," Evelyn whispered. "It followed me." Marley looked at her chest, where the other piece still glowed faintly beneath the skin. "Then we finish it," Marley said. "Now?" "While it's still weak." Evelyn nodded. Because there were still others trapped inside the mirror. Still names carved into the walls. Still echoes bleeding into glass. And until they shattered the last piece, no one would ever be safe. Not from reflections. Not from memory. Not from the house that still, somewhere, waited to rebuild itself. They didn't talk much on the way down. Evelyn and Marley moved like shadows through the skeleton of Denton's Hollow. Two revenants in a town that had never belonged to the living. The sun broke weakly through the trees, its rays thin and gray, casting a half light that seemed to bend around them instead of landing on their skin. Every step Evelyn took sent another echo through her chest, a dull, pressing throb from the shard embedded just left of her heart. It wasn't just pain anymore, it was awareness. The piece inside her had begun to move, subtly, shifting with each heartbeat as though searching for something. Or listening. Marley led her past the smoldered ruins of the house, through an alley Evelyn hadn't noticed before, one the town itself seemed to hide. It narrowed to a crawl space that opened into a clearing shaped like a tear. The trees curved away from the center, their trunks bent as if recoiling. Most grew upside down here, hanging like hair from bark. The air felt warped, too close, charged with static. In the center was the last mirror. Not tall like the others, not ornate. Just a single pane, wide and squat, its frame sunk halfway into the earth like a grave marker. Cracks webbed across its surface, but it wasn't broken. Not yet. "It's the source," Marley said, her voice quiet, reverent. "The original. The seed the house grew from." Evelyn stepped closer, her breath catching as her reflection swam into view, except it wasn't hers. It was theirs, dozens of versions of her face flickering across the glass, cycling too fast to register. Some were smiling, others were howling. One had no mouth at all. She turned to Marley. "What happens if we break it?" Marley didn't answer right away. Her fingers toyed with the edge of her shard. "We set them free," everyone the house ever took, everyone it twisted into memory and kept as echo. And us, either we go with them or we stay. As the new walls, the new mirrors, the words hung in the air like smoke. It wasn't a choice, not really. Evelyn had never come back to live. She'd come back to end it. She stepped toward the glass, but the shard in her chest burned suddenly, fiercely. She stumbled back with a cry, pressing a hand against her ribs. The mirror responded. It shivered. Waves moved across its surface. The reflections slowed, stabilized, and in that sudden stillness, she saw something looking out from within. Not her. Not Marley. Not any human thing. It leaned forward, stretching the glass, its form flickering like an image trapped between two film reels. It had no face, no eyes, only a presence that crawled along her nerves like fire. It didn't speak. It didn't need to. The message was clear. You are not finished. Evelyn fell to her knees, gasping. The shard in her chest had begun to crack. Tiny splinters now crawled out from beneath her skin, glinting faintly under the surface like stars buried in flesh. Her body pulsed with them, her blood pushing them further through her veins with every beat. It's inside me, she whispered. Marley knelt beside her. That's why it won't let you destroy it. The mirror sees itself in you now. Then what do I do? Marley handed her the other shard. Evelyn looked down at the jagged piece of silver. Its surface shimmered, faint ripples dancing across it like heat rising from asphalt. You give it a new reflection, Marley said. The mirror in the ground began to glow. The reflections grew still, and they watched, all of them. Hundreds of faces, Evelyn's, Marley's, strangers. Victims, their eyes locked on Evelyn, not pleading, but waiting. She stood, staggering, and lifted both shards. The one from her chest and the one from Marley's hands. She brought them together, not to smash the mirror, to complete it. As soon as the shards touched, light erupted. Not gold, not white, but silver, cold, pure, endless. And with it came the sound. 1,000 voices whispering the same word, remember. The mirror surged forward like a wave, swallowing them whole. And then, stillness. No wind, no breath, no light. Evelyn opened her eyes slowly. She was standing in her childhood bedroom. Sunlight trickled through gauzy curtains. Her diary sat open on the nightstand. The air smelled like lavender and dust. She turned. Marley sat on the edge of the bed, feet swinging gently. Neither spoke. They didn't have to. This wasn't the past. This wasn't a memory. This was the mirror's mind, and they were at the very center. Evelyn looked around. The room was perfect, too perfect. The walls didn't just look like her old room. They felt like it. She could hear the exact creak of the floorboard near the closet. She could smell the same old scratchy quilt. Everything the house had consumed, every scrap of memory it had devoured to build its prison. It was here, laid out in perfect order. It had made her a home. Because it wanted her to stay, to become its next foundation. But she wasn't a scared girl anymore. She stepped to the wall and touched it. Let them go, she said. The house didn't respond. She pressed the two shards together. Let them go. A tremor rippled through the floor. Cracks spread across the ceiling. Light began to pour in, not from lamps, not from outside, but from within the walls. The house screamed, not in anger, in fear, because Evelyn remembered, and she was turning the mirror inside out. Every reflection the house had stolen, every soul, every thought, every shadow, flooded back, pouring out of the walls, surging toward the glass that had birthed it all. And as the room fell away, as the mirrors shattered, as the silver storm swallowed everything, Evelyn reached for Marley's hand. They stepped forward and shattered together. For a moment, Evelyn thought she was dying again. The sensation was all too familiar now, not the body-breaking kind of death, but the deeper one, the kind where time folds in on itself and nothing feels real except the cold certainty in your chest. She and Marley had stepped through the collapsing dream space of the mirror, hand in hand, into what she thought would be oblivion. But it wasn't. There was no final rest, no quiet, no ending. Instead, there was this. She woke up standing, not lying, not gasping for breath or struggling to remember who she was. Just standing. The sky overhead was black glass, reflecting no stars, only distance. A horizonless world stretched before her. Jagged hills that seemed to melt into each other, as if reality itself had been misremembered. Trees grew sideways, some pulsing faintly with light that wasn't light at all, more like memory solidified and hung like lanterns in dead branches. The ground beneath her feet cracked faintly as she shifted. Brittle, like old photographs pressed too long beneath heat. She turned slowly. Marley was gone. The air around her whispered in low pulses. Not words, not quite, but ideas, half-formed, brushing against her thoughts. She broke it. She belongs here. She knows too much now. There were no paths in this place. No signs. Only the feeling that each direction might pull her deeper into something she wouldn't be able to crawl back from. But still, she walked. Not because she wanted to. Because there was no choice. The world around her wasn't the house anymore. And it wasn't the mirror. It was what came after the mirror shattered. The echo of a prison undone. The memory of the cage still singing in the wind. She passed silhouettes. Things that looked like people from a distance, but when she got closer, they dissolved into threads. Strands of forgotten lives, unraveling in the air, tangled into tree roots or pooled at the base of broken structures that may have once been homes. Some of them whispered. Others laughed in short, broken loops. One hummed the melody she'd heard Marley sing all those years ago, and each step deeper brought her closer to understanding what this place truly was. This was the dream of the house, not the house itself, not even its mirror image, but what the house dreamt of when no one was watching. A world where it didn't just reflect and consume, but became everything. Evelyn stopped at the crest of a hill that wasn't there 5 minutes ago and watched the land shift below. A valley had formed, and at its center was something impossible, a tower built from mirrors, spiraling into the sky, each reflective panel breathing. In, out, like the skin of some slumbering beast. This wasn't over. She should have known. You don't kill something like the house by shattering its glass. You just wake it up. And now it was dreaming her. As she approached the base of the tower, the voices sharpened. They weren't just ideas anymore. They were people. Some familiar. Some unknown. Her mother's voice, from that final day in the hospital. I wanted to tell you everything, but I knew the house would hear. Her own voice, younger. Frightened, I didn't mean to look. I didn't mean to let it in. A man's voice she didn't recognize, gasping, "It wears me when I sleep. I see it behind my eyes." A child's whisper. It came through the frame when no one was home. The closer she got, the more unbearable it became. The tower didn't reflect her anymore. It replayed her. Panels showed her life on loop, but wrong, twisted. One shard showed her comforting her mother, while blood spilled from her eyes. Another flashed the moment she held Marley's hand, except Marley had no face. One loop never changed the moment she pressed her hand to the first mirror, and it pressed back. She reached the base of the tower, heart thudding. Her chest ached. The shard still embedded there had started to glow again, silver light bleeding through her skin like cracks in porcelain. She knew what that meant. The tower recognized her. Or maybe more accurately, it had always been part of her. Because that was the truth, wasn't it? She hadn't just carried the shard out of the house. She had become one. She placed her hand against the base of the tower. It didn't push back. It welcomed her. And then the tower opened. The inside was worse. Not blood or horror, intimacy. A spiral staircase led upward, and on every wall, more mirrors. But these ones didn't show her. They showed the others. The ones who never made it out. Faces she didn't recognize. Men, women, children, some twisted into inhuman shapes, others frozen in moments of panic, fear, or surrender. One boy was screaming, hand pressed flat to the mirror like he'd been trapped there for decades, his mouth moving in silent desperation. As she climbed, the air thickened. She began to forget why she was climbing. The tower pulsed around her, and with each heartbeat, a piece of her faded. She forgot what her first grade teacher looked like. She forgot her mother's laugh. She forgot the smell of cinnamon on Christmas morning. The house was feeding again, but she kept going, because at the top of the tower, a door waited. It wasn't fancy. Just a wooden frame, paint peeling, knob rusted, but through it, she could hear something still alive. Marley. Evelyn didn't pause. She turned the knob. The door didn't open. It dissolved. The room beyond was small, empty, except for a mirror. Not cracked, not broken, not breathing, just there. Marley stood in front of it. She was holding her shard again, but her reflection was wrong. It smiled when she didn't, moved when she stayed still. She turned as Evelyn stepped inside. "I tried," she said softly. "I tried to leave, but it remembered me." Evelyn approached slowly. "It's trying to make us forget again, rebuild itself through us." Marley nodded. "It wants to sleep, but it can't while we're awake." And Evelyn looked at the mirror and finally understood. This was the core, the first mirror. The one Marley touched when she was just a girl. The one that opened everything. The one that had to be broken right, not with rage, but with memory. Evelyn reached into her chest. The shard slid out like it was never truly lodged there, more a part of her than a foreign object. It pulsed in her palm. She turned to Marley. Together. Marley nodded, lifting her own. They stepped forward. The mirror shimmered. It began to twist, as if it could feel what was about to happen. Their reflections screamed, but they didn't stop. One step, two. Then they raised the shards and drove them forward. Glass shattered. Not just in the mirror, everywhere. A soundless explosion tore through the tower. The spiral cracked, its panels falling like dying stars. Faces fled into the light. Whispers turned to wind. The tower groaned and fell. Evelyn didn't feel the ground. She didn't feel the collapse. She only felt release. For the first time, she was nobody. And that, finally, was peace. Then, a breath air. Real air. She opened her eyes. She was lying in grass. Dawn. The sky pink soft. She sat up slowly. Marley sat beside her. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The town was gone. Denton's Hollow had been reduced to overgrowth and ash. No structures. No mirrors. Just earth. The shard was gone from Evelyn's chest, but she could still feel it. Not burning. Not bleeding. Just there. A mark. A reminder. The world would move on. Most people would forget the name Briar Lane. Crestfall would crumble. The stories would fade, but she would not forget. And neither would Marley. Because sometimes, the only way to kill something born in reflection is to become its memory and guard it forever. They didn't speak for a long time after the fall. Evelyn and Marley sat in the tall grass, backs to the morning sun, listening to the world breathe without mirrors. The air was different now, clean, unsplit, untouched by reflection. No distortion lingered in the wind. No doubled images shimmered in puddles or blades of dew. For the first time in years, Evelyn could close her eyes and not see herself blinking out of sync in a piece of glass. It should have felt like peace, but it didn't. Not entirely. Not yet. Marley was the first to move. She stood without a sound, brushing ash from her dress that no longer looked burnt or tattered but plain, white. The kind of clothing you forget you're wearing. Evelyn followed, her joints aching with a stiffness that didn't belong to her muscles, but her memory. They walked out of the ruins of Denton's Hollow without looking back. The trees closed behind them slowly, naturally, as if they'd always wanted to reclaim the land, as if they'd been waiting for the house to die. It was late afternoon by the time they reached the road. A single rusted sign greeted them: Crestfall, 3 miles. The paint had peeled, the letters had bled from years of rain and silence. And behind that sign, Down the dirt path leading back toward town, Evelyn saw the shimmer. It was faint, barely there, but it pulsed at the edge of her vision, like something hiding behind heat. A pane of glass, no taller than a child, propped against a tree. Just standing there, she froze. Marley stopped beside her. "You see it too?" Evelyn asked. Marley nodded. "It's not the same," she said. "But it remembers us." Evelyn stepped closer. The mirror shimmered as if breathing, its surface thin and stretched. This wasn't part of the house, not the same material, not bound to the same sickness. But it had survived, somehow. A splinter of the dream, a crack that hadn't sealed. Within its surface, the reflection shifted. Not Evelyn. Not Marley. Something else. Not a person. A shadow. Faint and tall and crooked at the edges, just like the first one Evelyn ever saw behind Marley in the attic so long ago. It didn't move. It didn't reach. It simply stood, watching. "Why didn't it die with the rest?" Evelyn whispered. "Because we didn't kill it," Marley said. "We just starved it." The silence tightened between them. The wind stilled. Evelyn's breath caught. "So it's still hungry." Marley nodded. "We closed the doors," she said, "but we didn't erase the memory of them." Evelyn knelt beside the mirror. It flickered faintly, its surface rippling in recognition. The shadow leaned closer. Its form had no face, but she felt it watching her the same way you feel a sudden chill before a storm. She stood and turned to Marley. "We can't just leave it." "No," Marley agreed, "but we can't smash it either. That's not how it works." "Then what do we do?" Marley's face was unreadable, but her voice was steady. "We keep it." Evelyn blinked. "What?" Marley reached into her pocket and pulled out a roll of black cloth, soft, worn, the kind used to cover sacred things. She knelt and wrapped the mirror slowly, carefully, without ceremony. Each fold of fabric dulled the shimmer, muffled the shadow within. "We keep it," Marley repeated. "We carry it. So no one else does. You want us to be the keepers. Not forever. Just until it forgets how to remember." Evelyn didn't argue. Because deep down, she knew Marley was right. This thing, whatever it was, wasn't defeated. It had simply been displaced. The house, the dream, tower, the echo, maze of broken memories. All of that had collapsed. But the root had survived. And now it had no place left to hide except here, at the edge of the world, wrapped in cloth, trapped inside a shard too stubborn to die. They buried it just beyond the edge of the forest. Not deep, just enough to keep it from sight, not from sense. The soil resisted, vibrating faintly as the mirror touched the earth. But Marley pressed her palm flat to the dirt and whispered something Evelyn didn't catch. The vibrations stopped. The air stilled. And the forest was silent again. They marked the grave with nothing. No stone, no name, only absence. When they walked away, neither of them looked back. Crestfall had changed. The town wasn't empty anymore. The people who had vanished, or parts of them, were back. Evelyn saw them in windows, in grocery aisles, on doorsteps. Eyes wide with the kind of expression only survivors wear. They didn't speak of what happened. But when she passed, they watched. Not with fear, not with suspicion, with recognition. Someone had broken the loop. Someone had cracked the mirror. She and Marley stayed in town for a few days. No one asked questions. They were treated like weather. Something that arrives, makes a mess, and then leaves. Evelyn slept in the same room she'd once passed through in a coma. The window no longer reflected her twice. The mirror above the sink stayed quiet. Still, she didn't use it. Not fully. She brushed her teeth with the light off. She closed the bathroom door when she changed. Not because she feared something might crawl through, but because she knew what it felt like to see yourself and realize you weren't alone in that reflection. Marley didn't speak much. She walked the outskirts of town, hands in her pockets, eyes always half focused, as if watching a second world shimmer just beneath this one. On the third night, Evelyn joined her near the edge of Briar Lane. The house was gone. Nothing remained but the foundation. Even the grass refused to grow there. Evelyn turned to Marley. Do you think it'll come back? Marley didn't answer right away. Then only if someone calls it. And what if they do? Marley looked at her with the kind of expression that didn't need words. A quiet, endless knowing. Then we answer. That night, Evelyn dreamed of glass, not shattering but rebuilding. Not maliciously, not deliberately, just naturally. A pain growing itself under moonlight. A reflection returning. A memory reassembling. She woke with tears in her eyes and a pressure in her chest. The shard was gone, but its imprint remained. Some mirrors don't need to show your face. They just wait for you to look long enough to forget it. She didn't sleep after that. She packed her bag, met Marley on the road, and together they walked into the dawn. Two girls with no past. Two souls with too many memories. And somewhere beneath their feet, deep in the soil, the mirror slept. But not forever. Never forever. Just long enough. Somewhere in the hills beyond Crestfall, where the fog hangs low even on cloudless days, and the crows watch from silent branches, there's a stretch of road that never quite dries. Evelyn and Marley walked that road as the sky bruised into gray above them. They didn't know exactly where they were headed, only that they couldn't stay. Not near the grave they had made. Not near the silence that pulsed beneath it. Distance, they both understood, was a kind of protection. Not for themselves, but for the world. The thing buried in Denton's hollow wasn't dead. It wasn't even sleeping. It was remembering. Slowly, subtly. And if they stayed too long, if they lingered and listened, it might remember them first. The road narrowed the further they walked. Signs grew scarcer, towns more forgettable. Each one they passed looked like a ghost of the last. Gas stations with flickering lights, diners that closed before sunset, motels where the mirrors were already covered in towels without anyone having to ask. People looked through them, not at them. As if something in Evelyn's eyes made them nervous. As if they could feel it even if they couldn't name it. By the fifth town, Evelyn had stopped trying to act normal. She let the stares linger, let the cashier's hands shake as they gave her change. She didn't smile anymore, because the truth was simple. She didn't know how to pretend she was ordinary now. Not after the mirror. Not after watching her own face lie back at her for years. Something in her had changed. Not just survived, but shifted. She still looked like Evelyn Harrow on the outside, but beneath the skin was something watching. Something waiting. She saw it one night in a motel bathroom. It was nearly 3 a.m. She couldn't sleep. The room was too quiet, the mattress too clean. Marley was asleep in the bed, curled tightly beneath the blanket, her breathing soft. Evelyn had tried not to look in mirrors since Denton's Hollow. But old habits die hard, and curiosity, the very thing that started all of this, never truly dies. She stood in front of the cracked mirror above the sink, toothbrush limp in her hand. And it looked back. Not her. Not anymore. It smiled first. A fraction of a second early. The kind of smile that isn't warmth or kindness, but a mask slipping into place. The reflection didn't mimic her movements. It anticipated them. Tilted its head a moment too soon. Blinked while she stared, and in its eyes, her eyes, Evelyn saw something else. Not the house, not the thing that once wore her face. Something new. An observer. Patient. Curious. Growing. She didn't scream. She didn't even flinch. Instead, she leaned in close, staring hard into the glass until the thing behind her face blinked again. And this time, she spoke. I know you're there. The smile didn't fade, but the reflection paused. A silence passed between them, thicker than air, heavier than fear. I'm not afraid of you, Evelyn said quietly. I've been consumed by better monsters than you'll ever be. And just like that, the reflection matched her again. Blink for blink. Breath for breath. Gone. But the feeling remained. A presence beneath the surface, content to wait to watch. That was when Evelyn realized something terrifying. The mirror they buried in Denton's Hollow might have been the original. But it wasn't alone. They hadn't just severed a head, they'd scattered the seeds. Every piece of shattered memory, every sliver of glass the house had ever touched, still remembered, still held traces. And now, without a center to bind them, they were drifting, looking for new places to settle, to grow. The reflections had begun watching back. Marley felt it too. She started waking up at night with blood in her nose and dreams she couldn't explain. She'd whisper names in her sleep, names neither of them recognized. Sometimes she'd mumble numbers, long sequences that made no sense until Evelyn heard one of them spoken aloud on a radio station 3 towns later. A call, in contest, a winning code. Coincidence, maybe. But they knew better than to believe in coincidences now. On the 7th day of travel, Marley sat beside a dusty payphone at a gas station and said, "It's finding its way back." Evelyn didn't ask what she meant. She already knew. The house had never needed to stand in one place. It wasn't the place. It was the pattern. A way of seeing. A way of forgetting yourself in glass. She'd seen it now in puddles, in rearview mirrors, in the gleam of stainless steel cutlery. A flicker. A wrong blink. A second too long between movements. All signs. All cracks in the boundary. One night, Evelyn took a mirror off the wall in a motel bathroom and shattered it deliberately. Marley didn't ask why. They both understood. It wouldn't stop anything. Not really. But it bought them time. Because this wasn't about running anymore. This was about slowing the spread. Each town was a pulse. Each reflection a whisper. And Evelyn had started hearing the whispers again. Just barely, on the edge of her thoughts. Words not spoken, but thought near her. Not commands. Suggestions. Why not look? Just for a second. You were always curious. It won't hurt this time. Just one glance. She ignored them, most days. Some days she didn't. And that was when she knew. The thing they buried in the woods was changing strategy. It didn't want to wear her anymore. It wanted to become her again, from the inside out. Through her memories. Through her eyes. By making her forget the difference. And it could wait. It had always been patient. But now Evelyn was patient too. She didn't run from the reflections anymore. She watched them. Tracked them. She and Marley started carrying notebooks filled with sketches, notes, street names, dates, patterns. They were mapping the infection. The echoes. Trying to piece together a system of where the glass spoke and where it stayed silent. It was spreading, yes. But it was spreading toward something, a central point. An anchor. A new nexus. One night, Marley circled a town on the map without speaking. It was a place neither of them had been to. Small. Quiet. Off the grid. Evelyn stared at the name and felt a cold knot twist in her stomach. It was called Whitley Gap. Neither of them said the word again. They didn't have to. Because they knew. The dream had a new house. The watchers behind the mirrors had found their next frame. And this time, they wouldn't wait to be invited in. They were building a door, and on the other side of it, they were already watching. Whitley Gap did not appear on GPS. It wasn't listed in any of the maps Evelyn and Marley carried, nor was it mentioned in the logbooks they'd started keeping since Denton's Hollow. But they'd both dreamed it, separately, in different motels on different nights. And when they compared notes the next morning, they had written down the same name, not in their own handwriting, but something else. Sharp, angular lettering neither of them recognized, as if their hands had been guided by something else entirely. The road leading to Whitley Gap was unmarked, a break in the trees that shouldn't have existed. No pavement, just wet soil and gravel, an uneven path barely wide enough for their car. The trees bent inward, their trunks bloated and dark, and the further they drove, the more Evelyn felt the presence she had hoped to outrun. A tension in the air that hummed just above hearing. Like something remembering how to breathe through her bones. They arrived in the early morning hours, headlights sweeping across what looked like an abandoned town frozen mid-blink. The buildings were pristine, not overgrown, not collapsing, but lifeless. Every window covered, every door closed. The architecture looked familiar in that uncanny way dreams often do. Pieces from other places Evelyn had once visited, stitched together by someone who had never actually been there. And then she saw it. A mirror in every window. Not inside. Instead of glass. Reflective surfaces where panes should have been. No curtains, no light, just mirror. Every building had one. Shops, houses, the rusted post office. Even the church at the center of town had a crucifix made entirely of cracked silver, shining dully in the gray light. Evelyn didn't need to get out of the car to know. This place had already been claimed. Marley said nothing. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tight her knuckles turned white. They sat there for a while, the car engine humming like a nervous breath, the trees behind them too still, too expectant. Eventually, Evelyn opened the door. The wind had a scent she couldn't name. Not rot, not mold, but something left behind. Like air that had spent too long inside a closed mouth. They walked through Whitley Gap in silence. No people. No animals. No sound. But the mirrors were alive. Not moving, not shifting, but watching. Every step they took, they felt eyes behind the reflections. Not singular. Plural. Layers and layers of something ancient learning how to see. One mirror blinked. Just once. Just barely. But they both saw it. "They're testing something," Marley whispered. Evelyn nodded. Or someone. She approached the church, drawn not by faith but by instinct. The front door creaked open before she touched it. Inside, pews stood in perfect rows, untouched by dust. At the altar stood a single figure, not a priest, not a person. A reflection. It shimmered, ghost-like, not quite there. A humanoid shape, faceless, flickering like old film, and it mimicked her stance perfectly. Not a beat behind, simultaneous. Evelyn stepped forward. It did the same. She raised a hand. It matched her. Then, in a breath of silence, it spoke, not aloud, in her head, "Welcome home." Evelyn froze. "You are not me," she said. The thing smiled, its face still empty. "No. But we are learning." The reflections in the pews flickered to life. Each surface twisted into a mirror. And in every one, another Evelyn. Some crying, some laughing, one holding a knife. All watching. "You're copying me," she whispered. "We are growing you." The thing stepped forward now, leaving no footprints, casting no shadow. "You broke the tower. You burned the dream. You buried the eye. But it remembers. It always remembers. And now we remember you." Evelyn turned to Marley, but Marley wasn't behind her anymore. She stood at the back of the church, stiff, eyes wide, locked on something behind the altar. A mirror. A perfect, flat pane that hadn't reflected anything until now. And within it, Marley's reflection. Moving on its own, it smiled. And in a voice that wasn't hers, it said, "She brought you back in, just like before." Evelyn reached for her, but the world twisted. The church bent in on itself like a funhouse maze collapsing. The pews folded sideways. The ceiling cracked open to reveal not sky, but more mirrors, each one spinning above like orbiting eyes. And then it spoke again, all of them, in one voice. 1,000 reflections with her face, Marley's face. Faces of strangers she had never known but somehow remembered. "You are the original memory. You are the first breath. You are what we need to stay awake," Evelyn screamed. Not out of fear, out of rage, because she understood the house had learned its lesson. It wouldn't build one place. It would build a person, her. She turned and ran, yanking Marley out with her. The doors of the church slammed shut behind them. Windows blinked. Mirrors in every building began to warp and ripple, and Evelyn felt it. The spread. The way a dream starts to take shape the moment someone remembers it too clearly. They reached the car. Marley didn't speak. Her hands trembled as she started the engine. As they peeled away, the town behind them didn't disappear. It shifted. Like it never existed in that spot at all. Like it was already on the move again. Looking for the next person to remember it. To let it in. To become the new frame. And as Evelyn stared into the side mirror, she saw the truth. Whetley Gap hadn't just copied her. It had framed her memory. And now it knew her better than she knew herself. And it was waiting for her to look again. They didn't speak for hours after leaving Whetley Gap. The silence between them wasn't passive. It was alive, thick like fog inside the car, the kind of quiet that settled in your lungs and made every breath feel like an intrusion. Evelyn sat in the passenger seat, her gaze fixed to the horizon even as her mind replayed what she had seen, her reflection blinking in sync, the mirrors whispering in voices that did not belong to any single throat, and that final sentence echoing across every surface: "You are what we need to stay awake." That phrase lodged itself into her bones. She could feel it now, crawling under her skin, circling her thoughts like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. It wasn't just a warning, it was a claim. They had chosen her, not for destruction, but for inheritance. She was no longer merely a survivor, she was a seed. And that realization was far worse than any threat the mirrors could have screamed. Marley kept her eyes on the road, hands gripping the steering wheel like it might drift away if she let go. Evelyn noticed how pale she looked in the weak sunlight. Not sick, faded. As if something in the church had taken more from Marley than either of them had realized. Evelyn wanted to ask her about the reflection they saw, Marley's other self, the one that had spoken. But every time she opened her mouth, the words curdled before they left her lips. What if that thing had followed them? What if it was still inside Marley now, watching, waiting? When they finally stopped for gas at a roadside station deep in the trees, Evelyn went inside alone. The cashier didn't look up when she entered. He stood frozen behind the counter, staring at a small TV on the shelf that played static in black and white. Not snowy fuzz, but grainy images flickering too fast to make sense. People walking backward, doors opening into darkness, a child with no face. Evelyn didn't speak. She grabbed water, some snacks, and headed for the counter. Only when she stood in front of him did the man's eyes slowly shift to meet hers. Not startled, just tired. "You came from the wrong way," he said flatly. Evelyn froze. He didn't blink. No one drives out of Whetley Gap. Not unless they were supposed to stay. She cleared her throat. "We didn't stay. No," he said. "But it did, and it's remembering faster now. You shook something loose. You gave it too much of yourself." Evelyn narrowed her eyes. "Who are you?" He gave a crooked smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm the one who never looked. That's the only reason I'm still breathing." She dropped the money on the counter and walked out, the man's words scratching at her spine like broken glass. Back in the car, Marley asked, "What did he say?" Evelyn stared out the windshield. "That we left something behind." Marley nodded slowly. "We always do." They drove until dusk, taking turns without thinking, letting instinct lead. The air around them had begun to feel stretched, the sun setting slower than it should, the horizon stuck in that long orange glow for miles. Time had stopped flowing like a river. It was looping, repeating, testing them. And that's when they saw the billboard, peeling paint, rusted supports. Half the letters gone, but the words still formed in Evelyn's head before she even read them aloud. "Welcome back to Whetley Gap," population remembered. She slammed her fist into the dashboard before Marley even finished braking. They hadn't left. Not really. The road had tricked them. It had doubled back. Marley cursed under her breath and pulled off to the shoulder. The sky darkened in a blink, the forest around them growing suddenly unfamiliar. Taller trees, thicker trunks, leaves with too many edges. "We didn't turn around," Evelyn said. "No," Marley whispered. It did. The world had turned around. The more Evelyn looked at the trees, the more she realized they were mirrored. Not metaphorically, literally. Each trunk had a faint reflection down its middle, splitting bark like a seam. Branches twisted upward in perfect symmetry. A forest made of living mirrors. They stepped out of the car cautiously. The silence was unbearable now, not peaceful but held, as if every sound had been swallowed before reaching their ears. Evelyn moved toward one of the trees and placed her hand on the bark. It rippled beneath her skin like oil. Then, behind her, a voice. Faint, feminine, familiar, her mother's voice. "Evelyn, you left me there." She spun around, empty forest. But the voice came again. Closer. "I saw it all, you know. The house, the glass. You were so small when it first touched you." Evelyn backed up, her heel catching on a root. "Stop," she hissed. But the voice obeyed. Only to be replaced by another. A mirror version of her own. "You didn't destroy anything. You just made it wider. We're not trapped anymore. We're everywhere." Marley grabbed Evelyn's arm, pulling her toward the car, but Evelyn yanked free. "No, we can't run from it. Not again. It's not the house anymore. It's not even Whitley Gap. It's our memory. It's in us. That's why it can find us." Marley's voice cracked. "Then how do we stop it?" Evelyn stared into the trees, now pulsing gently with internal light. She remembered the way the church ceiling split open, revealing mirror after mirror. She remembered the voice calling her the original memory. She understood now. It had all been seeded in her. From the first moment she'd touched that mirror as a child, it had seen her mind as fertile ground. It hadn't been trying to trap her. It had been growing inside her. The realization chilled her deeper than anything she'd experienced inside the house. "I think it's not trying to become me," she whispered. Marley's eyes narrowed. "Then what?" Evelyn's voice shook. "It's trying to rewrite me. And if it succeeds, if I forget who I am, if I accept the version it's creating, then the door won't be closed anymore. It'll be me. I'll be the door." Marley looked pale, but determined. "Then we don't let it finish." Evelyn turned back toward the car and opened the trunk. Inside was the box they'd buried months ago, the one they'd dug back up just in case, wrapped in black cloth, still humming faintly beneath the layers. The last surviving shard. They hadn't told anyone they'd reclaimed it. But they'd known. Some part of them always knew this wouldn't be over. Evelyn unwrapped the mirror slowly. The cloth clung to it, like skin reluctant to separate from flesh. The surface was still cracked, but intact enough to show a reflection. Her own face. A little older, a little sharper, but hers. She stared for a long moment, then whispered, "My name is Evelyn Harrow. My mind is mine. My body is mine. I am not a memory. I am not a door." The mirror flickered, fought, then stilled. For now, Marley stepped forward, gripping her hand. They stood together beneath the mirrored trees, two girls bound not by fate, but by remembrance. By sheer will not to become what the glass wanted. They would carry the shard again, not as prisoners, but as wardens, not to feed the reflection, but to keep it contained. And if the voices returned, if the world bent again, if time folded into glass, they would be ready, because now they knew its name. And the moment it whispered theirs back, they would answer. By the time they reached the next town, neither of them spoke about what they carried. The shard sat between them in the glove box, wrapped again in the same black cloth, still warm from their touch. Evelyn could feel it, even when she wasn't looking at it. A presence humming through the car like an engine inside an engine, waiting to start itself. She didn't open the glove box, not once. But the mirror was awake. It didn't need to be seen to remember her. The town didn't have a name. Not on any signs. Just a scatter of buildings, a diner that looked abandoned, and a gas station with pumps too old to still be running. But there were people. A woman behind the counter in the diner. A man sweeping the sidewalk outside a bar with no name on the door. And all of them looked at Evelyn and Marley as if they'd been expecting them. Not with kindness or suspicion. Something else. Something that felt like grief mixed with recognition. "They're like us," Marley said quietly, as they sat in a booth near the window. "They've seen it. Maybe not the house, but something." Evelyn nodded, like embers that never go out. She was about to speak again when a child walked past their table. No older than 6, dirty blonde hair, bare feet, dragging a stuffed rabbit missing one eye. The girl didn't say anything, just stopped beside Evelyn and stared. Evelyn tried to smile. The girl lifted the rabbit, and its remaining eye shimmered like glass. Evelyn's throat closed. The child said one word, soft and certain, "Remember," and then walked away. No one in the diner reacted, as if nothing had happened, as if none of them saw her. "She's a carrier," Marley said after a long silence. "Like us." Evelyn didn't reply. She was too busy feeling the burn in her chest. The mirror in the glove box had heard the word too. It pulsed. Once, beneath the layers of cloth. Not loud, not violent, just enough to remind her it was still part of her now. That night, they stayed in a tiny motel behind the gas station. One room, one bed, a window facing the woods, and, of course, a bathroom mirror. Evelyn covered it without thinking, but it didn't matter. When she dreamed, there were mirrors anyway. She dreamed of her mother, of the attic, of the sound the house made when it noticed you. She woke at 3:17 a.m., with blood under her fingernails and the taste of static in her mouth. Marley was already awake, sitting on the floor with the black cloth unfolded in front of her. The shard sat in her palm, glowing faintly like an ember taken from a dying fire. She didn't speak. Neither did Evelyn. They just looked at it. Two girls who had stopped running, not because they were brave, but because running didn't work anymore. "This town's infected too," Marley said finally, quietly. "They're not screaming, but they're linked. They know what lives in mirrors. Maybe they worship it." Evelyn sat beside her. "Or maybe they're just trying to outlast it." Marley looked up. "You think it can ever die?" Evelyn thought of the girl, of the rabbit's glass eye, of her reflection blinking out of sync, of the house rebuilding itself inside dreams, of Wetley Gap shifting like a mirage. "No," she said, "but I think we can keep it hungry." And that, in the end, was the only hope they had left. The next morning, they left without checking out. The diner was empty. The bar was boarded up. The child was nowhere to be seen. It was like the town had retreated into itself, folding its corners inward, hiding from whatever it knew was coming next. On the road again, Evelyn watched the landscape blur into gray. The mountains in the distance were familiar, but she couldn't say why. Every town started to look like the last. Every tree a little too symmetrical. Every puddle a little too still. She no longer believed they were escaping anything. The thing in the mirror, the memory that wouldn't die, wasn't chasing them. It wasn't chasing anyone. It was waiting. And it knew one day, someone would look long enough to bring it through. But not them. Not yet. Marley drove. Evelyn watched the side mirror. And somewhere in the glass, something watched back. It was subtle at first, how Evelyn changed. Not in body. Not in the sharp cut of her shadow, or the way her footsteps fell against cracked asphalt. The change came from the inside, slow and crawling. She didn't notice it in the way she blinked or how her reflection held her gaze for half a breath too long. No. The first time she truly understood what was happening was when she cut her hand. It was nothing at first. Just a nick from the edge of a broken mug at a roadside cafe that hadn't had real customers in weeks. The ceramic sliced deep across her palm. Blood bloomed fast and dark. Marley had rushed over, pulling a napkin from her bag, but Evelyn had already frozen, staring at her open wound. Because the blood didn't just run, it shimmered. Not like water, not like light, like glass. Tiny flecks sparkled in the red, too fine to be dust, too uniform to be coincidence. And for the briefest second, she thought she saw her own eye reflected back at her from inside her blood. She didn't tell Marley. Not that time. Instead, she excused herself to the bathroom, locked the door, and stood over the sink, staring at the pulsing throb in her palm. The mirror above the sink was foggy with age, stained with fingerprints and the ghost of a handprint too large to be hers. She didn't look into it. Not yet. She opened the wound with the tip of a key. Slow, careful, just enough to press the skin apart. And there it was again. Tiny, crystalline threads woven through her blood. Like hair, thin slivers of silver thread. She ran water over it and watched the reflections curl and break like smoke. She wasn't healing. She was absorbing. That night, she sat outside the motel with her hand wrapped and her thoughts unraveling. Marley came out eventually, 2 mugs of lukewarm coffee in hand. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to anymore. Marley knew something was wrong. She always knew. "You're changing," she said after a while. Her voice was calm, not accusing, just tired. Evelyn stared up at the stars that never looked quite right anymore. "It's in me. I thought it might be." "I don't think it's trying to control me," Evelyn said, her voice low. "I think it's trying to become me. Slowly, quietly. Until there's no difference left." Marley sipped her coffee, gaze steady. "Then we have to figure out which parts are still you." That sentence broke something loose in Evelyn's chest, because she wasn't sure anymore. There were moments, fleeting, but real, when her thoughts felt echoed, like something else inside her repeated them, just half a beat later. She'd reach for a doorknob and feel a coldness that wasn't the metal but resistance, like the world pulling slightly back. Sometimes, when Marley spoke, Evelyn would hear the sentence again in her mind, but twisted, warped, like the reflection of sound instead of the sound itself. She hadn't just walked through the mirror in Denton's Hollow. She had brought it with her. And now it was trying to grow a new house inside her. By the next town, things had worsened. Marley found Evelyn sleepwalking. Outside, barefoot in the motel parking lot, her eyes wide open but unseeing. She was standing in front of a puddle, speaking to it, repeating the same sentence over and over again. "Tell me where I end." She didn't remember any of it when she woke. But Marley did. She filmed it. And when Evelyn watched it the next morning, she saw something far worse than sleepwalking. In the video, she didn't have a reflection. Not in the puddle. Not in the car windows. Not in the motel room door. She was there, but her image wasn't. And Marley, silent, shaking, zoomed in on the puddle just before the clip ended. And there it was, the other Evelyn, not a reflection. Not a match. A woman in glass skin, bleeding silver light from her mouth and eyes, grinning with teeth that shimmered like knives. "I think it's building me from the outside now, too," Evelyn whispered. Marley looked hollow. "We have to get rid of it. The shard." "No," Marley said slowly. "You." The silence was a blade between them. Evelyn didn't react, not with anger, not with fear, only with understanding. Because she had thought it too. Maybe the only way to kill the mirror's last seed was to kill the one still carrying it. "Her. I don't want to die," Evelyn said. Marley's hands were fists. "I don't want to be the one who has to decide." They sat like that for a long time. 2 girls on the edge of something far older and far more dangerous than death. By dusk, the decision hadn't been made. But something else had. The sky began to crack. Not with lightning, with lines. Hairline fractures in the clouds. Like someone had dropped a mirror over the entire world, and it had started to break along its old, hidden seams. The birds stopped flying. The wind held its breath, and in every window, car, shop, street sign, reflections began to stutter. People in town noticed. They didn't scream. They just stopped. One by one, they stood in streets, in stores, in parking lots, all facing glass, all watching themselves flicker and twist. And in unison, every mouth opened. And every voice, not human anymore, said the same thing. "She is almost ready." Evelyn collapsed, not from pain, from connection, like being plugged into something massive, something ancient. Her eyes rolled back, and she whispered in a language that hadn't existed in words. Marley held her, sobbing, begging her to come back. But Evelyn wasn't gone. Not yet. She was remembering everything. The tower, the glass, the dream beneath the dream, and in the middle of it a face, not hers, but so close. A blueprint. the original dreamer, the one who first built the house from her grief, the mirror mother. And in that moment, Evelyn understood something that made her stomach churn with horror. She was never meant to survive Denton's Hollow. She was meant to continue it. And now the memory was almost complete, unless someone cut it off at the source. And Marley might be the last person strong enough to try. Evelyn didn't speak for nearly 12 hours after the collapse. She lay in the motel bed, eyes open, unmoving, skin pale and cold like porcelain left too long in shadow. Marley sat beside her, still as a grave, watching every rise and fall of Evelyn's chest with growing dread. She'd seen trauma. She'd seen possession. She'd seen grief make ghosts of the living. But this was something else. Evelyn wasn't gone. She was caught, suspended between the mirror and herself, like a thread of breath tangled in shattered glass. Marley knew time was running out. She'd seen the sky split, heard the voice in every reflection. She is almost ready. That meant the thing inside Evelyn was almost finished, almost done turning her into it. She hadn't wanted to admit it before, hadn't even wanted to think it. But now the truth sat heavy in her chest like a second heartbeat. The memory wasn't just feeding off Evelyn. It was rebuilding itself through her. Flesh as blueprint, mind as mortar. She left the motel at sunset and walked to the edge of town, following a gut feeling that had grown sharper since Denton's Hollow. It pulled at her like a magnet made of whispers. The streets were empty again, windows dark, people hiding, or maybe waiting. Either way, the town had shifted. It wasn't safe anymore. Not for anyone. Not while Evelyn remained tethered to it. The road narrowed into woods, and the woods into thickets, until finally Marley found herself at a clearing with a single, broken swing swaying in windless air. She recognized it. A playground. From Evelyn's childhood. From a photo she once showed her years ago in an attic, before everything shattered. But this place wasn't in the real world. It had no roads leading to it. No birds sang above it. No roots broke through its soil. This was memory space, the mirror's domain. Somehow, Marley had crossed through, and she hadn't even looked into glass to do it. Because now, the mirror didn't need mirrors anymore. It had Evelyn. And through her, it could fold memory into matter. At the center of the playground was a woman sitting on the swing. She looked like Evelyn, but older, maybe 40, her hair longer, her face leaner. She didn't smile, just watched Marley with eyes that had no whites, only dark, rippling silver. "Are you her?" Marley asked. The woman tilted her head, chains of the swing groaning under her weight. "I am what she'll be, the part she's forgotten, the part she's becoming." "Why?" Marley stepped forward. "Why, Evelyn? Why now?" The woman laughed, and it was a sound like windows breaking underwater. "She looked," she said. "She always looked. Even when she was told not to. Even when the world turned its face. Curiosity is a door. And once opened." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Marley felt it in her bones, the house, the mirror, the voice behind the glass. It had all been leading to this. Evelyn wasn't chosen randomly. She was built for this. Raised by absence, shaped by trauma, carved hollow by grief so something else could fill the space. "She's still in there," Marley said. "I know it." The woman nodded. "Of course she is. That's the problem." Marley's fists clenched. "Then I'll get her back." "How?" The woman stood now. "With what?" "Words. Memories. Do you really think that little girl who saw her mother split in glass and didn't scream is still something you can rescue?" "Yes," Marley said, and for the first time the woman hesitated, just slightly. That was enough. Marley charged her. There was no plan, no strategy, only instinct, rage, love. She tackled the figure off the swing and into the dirt, but instead of hitting solid ground, they sank through it, like falling into water, like crashing into a dream mid-sentence. The world spun inside out, and suddenly Marley was standing in a long hallway. The same one from Denton's Hollow. Endless, lined with mirrors on both sides, But this time, every reflection showed Evelyn. Different versions. Younger, older, wounded, dead, laughing, screaming. Each one pressed their palms to the glass as Marley passed, mouthing things she couldn't hear. Eyes pleading, she ran. Doors flickered on the walls. Behind one, she saw the attic. Behind another, the church in Whitley Gap. Another, her own face, sleeping, a shadow standing above her bed with Evelyn's smile. And finally, at the very end, she found her. The real Evelyn. Small, child-sized. Sitting in front of a shattered mirror, clutching a stuffed rabbit with one glass eye. Tears streaked her face. Her lips moved in a whisper Marley could barely hear. I didn't mean to look. I didn't mean to let her out. Marley knelt beside her, ignoring the cuts forming along her arms from the mirror-strewn floor. It's not your fault, she said. None of this is your fault. Evelyn looked up. Her eyes weren't silver. Not yet, just gray, fading. I don't know who I am anymore. You're the girl who looked and survived, Marley whispered. You're the girl who made it out of the house. The one who buried the shard. The one who keeps fighting even when the world won't look at you. Evelyn shook her head, but she's already wearing me. Then we tear her off. Marley reached out, touched her hand, and everything exploded. The mirrors shattered in a wave, each one exploding outward, throwing them into a storm of memory and light and voice. 1,000 whispers screaming in reverse. Marley felt herself pulled in every direction. But she didn't let go. She held Evelyn's hand tighter, and suddenly they were back. Back in the motel. Back in the room. Evelyn gasped, sitting bolt upright. The shard on the nightstand split clean down the center, finally broken. Marley sat on the floor, coughing, dizzy, bleeding. Evelyn turned to her with wide, clear eyes. I remembered, she whispered. I remembered who I am. Marley smiled through the ache. Then it didn't win. No, Evelyn said, her voice trembling. But it's still trying. They both looked to the window, to the glass that hadn't cracked. And in it, just for a second, Marley saw herself blink. A fraction too late. They left before dawn. The motel behind them still humming with something that refused to settle. Evelyn didn't sleep that night, and Marley barely did. There was too much weight in the air. Not the heaviness of fatigue, but of presence. Something unseen sat in the corner of every room, watching with eyes it hadn't finished making yet. The shard on the nightstand, now split in two, looked harmless. Ordinary even. But Evelyn knew better. The break didn't mean it was dead. It meant it had adapted. It had watched her come back. And now, it was mimicking her courage. The road out of the nameless town felt wrong. Not just in direction, but in detail. Landmarks were familiar but reversed. Buildings mirrored across the wrong shoulder of the highway, mile markers counting up instead of down. Even the sky held its clouds in place like a paused photograph. Evelyn sat in the passenger seat, her hands folded tight in her lap, eyes flicking toward the rearview mirror with a rhythm she couldn't break. She didn't trust reflections anymore. Not of herself. Not of Marley. Especially not of Marley. Since they'd escaped that memory space, if escape was even the right word, something had been off. Small things, but they built up. Marley forgot conversations they'd just had. She hummed songs she didn't know. Once, Evelyn caught her mouthing words in her sleep. Words that hadn't been said aloud in years, not since the house. And worst of all, her reflection sometimes smiled when she didn't. It happened again at the gas station. Evelyn was pumping fuel when she looked through the glass of the convenience store and saw Marley standing at the counter. But the angle was wrong. There were two Marleys, one facing the clerk. One in the reflection, still facing Evelyn, smiling faintly. Evelyn stepped back from the car, breath catching. A second later, Marley turned, the smile vanishing. The real Marley, probably. Back in the car, Evelyn asked, "You remember when we burned the attic?" Marley didn't hesitate. The fire wouldn't catch at first. You had to douse the mirror in salt water before it finally lit. Wrong. They'd never burned the attic. They had run from it. Evelyn nodded, kept her voice calm. Yeah, that's right. Inside, her mind was racing. If the mirror had truly learned to lie, if it could now reconstruct a person from memory, implant it, let it walk and speak and forget it wasn't real, then how could anyone be trusted? What if Marley hadn't come back from that memory space? What if the reflection had returned instead? She didn't sleep that night either. She stayed up watching Marley breathe. Even that had changed, shallower now, too steady. And then, sometime around 3:30 a.m., Evelyn saw something that made her blood run colder than anything the house had ever shown her. Marley blinked in her sleep. But not her eyes. Her reflection's eyes blinked. Just once, in the dark TV screen across the room. And Evelyn saw it. It looked at her, and smiled. She didn't wake Marley. She waited. Watched the clock drag itself toward morning. And when the sun came up, she made coffee. The kitchen had a small wall mirror near the fridge. She covered it with a towel before Marley came in. "You sleep okay?" she asked. Marley yawned. "Yeah, better than usual. You?" Evelyn shook her head. "Didn't sleep. You should try. Maybe later." They sat in silence for a while. And then Evelyn asked the question that had been clawing its way up her throat since the gas station. "If you weren't you," she said, "how would I know?" Marley blinked, then smiled faintly. "You wouldn't. Not until it was too late." She sipped her coffee. Evelyn didn't speak. She didn't scream. She didn't run. Because maybe, just maybe, that's what it wanted. To see what she'd do with the doubt. Later, when Marley was in the shower, Evelyn checked the rearview mirror of the car again. The passenger seat was empty. But in the reflection, someone was sitting there, head turned away, watching the motel window. And in that moment, Evelyn knew one thing for sure. The reflection had stopped trying to mimic her. Now, it was mimicking the people she loved. And the scariest part, it was getting better at it every single day. They arrived in the town of Marrow's End by accident, or at least, that's what Evelyn told herself. She hadn't seen it on a map, hadn't intended to stop. But the road had narrowed while they argued in the car, and when the trees opened again, there it was, a main street half swallowed by fog, buildings sagging like they were ashamed to stand upright, and people standing still in the doorways of shops with no names, not moving, not blinking, just watching. The silence wrapped around them as Marley killed the engine, a hollow kind of quiet that pressed down on the skin. "Where the hell are we?" Marley asked, her voice low, almost reverent. Evelyn didn't answer. She was staring at a man across the street. He was tall, dressed in a butcher's apron smeared with rust-colored stains. His eyes locked on hers. Wide empty, but not vacant, not at all. He raised one hand, palm open as if in greeting or warning. Evelyn didn't wave back. She opened the car door. "Are you seriously getting out?" Marley asked, alarm flaring behind her voice. "I've seen him before," Evelyn said. "Where?" "In a dream. Last night." Marley's face paled, but she followed. The man didn't move as they approached. His eyes flicked to Marley, then back to Evelyn. "You're not the first," he said, voice cracked like wet paper. Evelyn swallowed. "Not the first what?" "Carrier." The word dropped into her gut like a stone. Behind them, more doors creaked open. People began to step into the street, men, women, even children, all with that same frozen expression, like mannequins animated by forgotten gods. Marley grabbed Evelyn's arm. "We should go." The butcher smiled, showing teeth like chipped porcelain. "No one leaves until it finishes." Evelyn looked around. Every window in the town reflected not the outside world, but her. Just her. Hundreds of variations, all staring back, some bruised, some bloody, one version hanging from a ceiling beam, another holding a newborn baby that looked exactly like Marley. "It's feeding," Evelyn whispered. Marley pulled her back. "We're not staying." But the road behind them had vanished. Where the street should have led back into the forest, there was only black glass. A mirror stretched from ground to sky. They were inside it now. "This isn't a town," Evelyn said, heart racing. "It's a trap." The townspeople didn't speak again. They just started walking toward them. Not running. Not attacking. Just walking. One foot in front of the other. Like a slow, unbearable wave. Marley pulled the car door open, but Evelyn stood still, rooted. "Look at their faces," she said. Marley hesitated. And then she saw it. Each of the townspeople had something wrong, subtle at first, but undeniable. A third eyelid, mouths too wide, fingers that seemed to stretch when they moved. They were imperfect copies, glitches in the dream, failed reflections. They tried to become real, Evelyn breathed, and got stuck halfway. The butcher stopped just in front of them, up close. Evelyn saw the small cracks around his eyes, tiny fractures in the skin, as if glass was trying to push through from underneath. "She's almost finished," he rasped. "Who?" Evelyn asked. The butcher raised one trembling hand and pressed it to her chest. "You." And with that, the crowd collapsed. All at once, like puppets with strings cut. Dozens of bodies hitting the ground in eerie silence. Marley screamed. Evelyn staggered back. But none of them moved again. Dead, unclear, but still as the silence that followed. Evelyn turned slowly, scanning the town. Every mirror was now shattered. As if the act of naming her, the truth of what she was becoming, had broken something they could no longer control. "Come on," Marley whispered, tugging her toward the car again. This time, the road had returned. But Evelyn didn't believe it was that simple. Not anymore. This wasn't a place she had driven to. It was a place inside her. The town of Marrow's End had been waiting, hiding in a corner of her memory she hadn't dared explore. And when she got too close to remembering what she truly was, it brought her there to show her. This was the final warning, the last mirror that would ever tell the truth. Next time, it wouldn't ask her to look. Next time, it would pull her in. And the strangers waiting on the other side, they wouldn't need her face. They'd already learned how to wear her soul. The mirrors didn't crack anymore. That was the first sign something fundamental had changed. They didn't scream, didn't ripple, didn't twist into shapes meant to scare her. They had stopped trying to warn. Now, they simply watched, silent, unmoving, perfectly still, and that terrified Evelyn more than anything else. They drove for hours after leaving Marrow's End, following roads that weren't listed on any map. Marley checked the GPS 3 times before giving up completely. The screen just blinked back coordinates of all zeros, like the world they were in no longer existed inside anything measurable. Evelyn didn't care where they went anymore. She knew the destination wasn't a place on the map. It was inside her. And whatever waited at the end had been watching her through every window, puddle, and darkened screen since the day she touched the first mirror. The radio came alive somewhere near dusk, not with music, not even static, but a voice. No name, no station, just a cold whisper threaded with static. "Are you still pretending?" Evelyn turned it off without blinking. Marley said nothing. That was the second sign. Marley had stopped asking questions, stopped offering comfort. She still looked like herself, still smiled in all the right places, still moved the way Marley always had. But Evelyn knew. She knew. That wasn't the same person who'd stood with her in the church, or who'd screamed her name in the attic. That Marley had bled, cried, fought. This one, she mirrored, and never blinked when she thought Evelyn wasn't watching. That night, they stopped at a rest station with flickering lights and vending machines that only sold mirrored sunglasses. Evelyn sat on the curb outside while Marley went inside. She stared at her reflection in the rearview mirror of the car. For the first time, it didn't mimic her. It waited, and then, slowly, it moved its lips, no sound, no echo, just a shape let go. Evelyn turned away. "I know you're not her," she said out loud, not caring if anyone heard. A long pause. Then a voice behind her. Soft, sad, familiar. "But you were me." Evelyn turned and saw herself. Not a mirror image, not reversed, just her. A perfect, silent copy, wearing her old sweatshirt. Eyes tired in the same way hers used to be. Not cruel, not twisted. Just Evelyn before everything unraveled. The double sat beside her on the curb, knees drawn to her chest. "I never wanted this," it whispered. But I couldn't stop remembering. Evelyn stared. "Who are you?" The double smiled faintly. "The piece you left behind. When you ran, when you chose to forget, I stayed. I kept it safe." "Kept what safe?" The double didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out a shard of glass. Unbroken. Untouched. And Evelyn understood with sudden, stomach churning clarity not all of her had ever left the house. The night she escaped, when she believed the mirror had cracked and the house had collapsed, something had remained inside. Some small, silent part of her had chosen to stay behind in the dream, and now it had grown. "Do you remember what she looked like?" The double asked softly. Evelyn blinked. "Who?" "Your mother." A beat. Evelyn's lips parted. But the memory was smudged, not gone, just worn thin. Like someone had rubbed sandpaper over it. She tried again. The curve of a smile. A lullaby hummed under breath. A mirror smeared with lipstick notes. But no face, no voice. Nothing sharp enough to hold. The double leaned closer. "That's how it starts." Evelyn stood up, stumbling back. "I'm not losing myself." But her reflection in the car said otherwise. Her eyes were changing. Subtle, but real. The color darkening. The pupils thinning. "You already are," the double said. "You've been rewriting yourself every time you survive." "What choice did I have?" "You had one." The double whispered. "You could have died in that house. Could have let the mirror keep you. But you broke it. And every time you broke it, you scattered more of yourself into the world." Evelyn fell to her knees. It made sense now. The loop towns. The endless glass. The copycat people. They weren't just reflections. They were fragments of her. Scattered memories trying to reassemble into something that could no longer be human. She wasn't fighting a monster in the mirror. She was the monster. Or would be. Unless she did something that could never be undone. Unless she chose to forget, truly forget, who she was. The double offered her the shard. One last piece. A final connection. Evelyn reached out. And paused. "What happens if I take it?" The double smiled. "You'll remember everything. And then you'll have to decide whether to keep it or burn it." Behind her fake, Marley stood in the doorway of the gas station. Not moving. Just watching. Eyes wide. Unblinking. Evelyn closed her hand around the shard. And the whole world screamed. It didn't sound like any scream Evelyn had heard before. It wasn't pain. It wasn't rage. It was the sound of something waking up, like the shatter of a cathedral window, collapsing inward under the weight of memory. The air twisted. Lights above the gas station blinked and burst. The earth itself seemed to stutter, like reality had tripped on its own steps. And Evelyn, knees scraping asphalt, the shard clutched tight in her fist, felt the thing inside her move. Not metaphorically, not spiritually, physically. It coiled up her spine, like a snake made of voices, like silver thread threading through bone. Fake, Marley didn't move. She stood just beneath the light fixture, the flickering bulb above her painting her face in shadows that didn't match her features. Her mouth was a little too wide now, her neck too long, just enough to make the unease bloom sharp in Evelyn's gut. And yet, it still looked like her, still used her voice. When she finally spoke, it wasn't a growl, it wasn't a hiss, it was tender, loving. "Evelyn, let me help you hold it." Evelyn's fingers dug tighter into the glass shard, cutting her palm. Blood welled up between her fingers. Deep red threaded with something metallic, bright as mercury. The pain was real. It grounded her, reminded her she was still this side of the glass. "No," Evelyn said, her voice cracking. "You're not real. You never were." "Fake," Marley smiled softly. "Does that matter anymore?" The question landed too heavy, because Evelyn didn't know. Did it matter? What if the difference between real and false had already blurred beyond repair? What if the mirror hadn't just copied Marley but rebuilt her better? Stronger, kinder, more willing to stay? What if the real Marley had been the fragile one all along? The one who might have broken under the weight of what was coming. But then Evelyn remembered the attic, the voice screaming her name, the hand that refused to let go of hers even when the door melted into glass, the blood, the breath, the fight. That had been real. This was a performance, and Evelyn was done watching. She stood, the shard in her hand burning hotter now, light bleeding from it like a miniature sun. The ground trembled beneath her feet. Fake. Marley tilted her head, frowning. "You can't keep it," she said. "You're not strong enough." "I don't want to keep it," Evelyn whispered. "I want to end it." And with that, she drove the shard into her own chest. The glass sank through skin like ice into water. Her body accepted it, not with rejection, not with resistance, but with a sigh, a terrifying sense of release, as if something inside had been waiting for this. The light exploded from her ribcage, white, blinding, silent. Fake Marley screamed, not with voice, but with every inch of her unraveling form. Her skin peeled away in sheets of memory, scenes Evelyn barely recognized flashing across her body. The night her mother disappeared, the first nightmare of the attic, the reflection that followed her to school, the way the house watched. And then she was gone. Just like that, dissolved into vapor, sucked into the glass veins crawling down Evelyn's arm. But Evelyn didn't collapse. She rose, body glowing, heart slowing. She could feel it now. Every mirror, every shard, every whisper and echo and duplicate made from the broken version of her. They were calling to her, not to fight, to join, to lead. She stumbled back into the gas station bathroom. The mirror above the sink cracked down the center, but not shattered. It pulsed, like a heartbeat. And for the first time, Evelyn saw herself clearly. Not the girl who had survived the house, not the broken version trapped in memories, but the one they'd been trying to build all along. The Mirror Queen. She was beautiful and terrible, part human, part dream. Her veins glinted like silver filigree. Her eyes were deep wells of reflection, holding every version of herself that had ever died to bring her here. And yet she was still her. Somehow, some part had held on. Marley's voice, the real one, echoed behind her eyes. "Don't let it finish the story without you." So Evelyn made a choice. She gripped the edges of the bathroom sink, leaned in toward the mirror, and said her name out loud, not whispered, not scared. "Evelyn Harrow." The mirror listened. The mirror hesitated. And that was enough. She pulled the light out of the shard in her chest and slammed it into the mirror's center. A final, searing act of defiance. The glass howled. Every reflection cracked at once. All over the world. Gas station windows, rearview mirrors, bathroom vanities, phones, TVs, puddles, everything. Cracks spidered like veins of truth through the surfaces the memory had claimed. For the first time in years, people saw themselves clearly again, without the echo, without the hum, without the other. Evelyn dropped to the floor. The shard fell from her chest, dead now, gray, cold. She breathed. She blood. And for the first time since she was a child, she was alone in her body. She passed out there on the bathroom tiles, heartbeat slow but steady, blood pooling beneath her but clean. No more silver. And outside, the world held its breath. Because it wasn't over. The mirrors had cracked. But they hadn't broken. Not all of them. And some reflections. Some reflections had learned how to live without the glass. When Evelyn woke, she couldn't feel her hands. It was like her bones had turned hollow. The pressure in her chest was gone. No shard, no light. But something else had replaced it. Not pain, not even fear. Just a quietness, thick and absolute. Like the static left behind after the signal cuts out. She sat up slowly on the grimy gas station bathroom floor, shirt soaked in half-dried blood. Breath catching in her throat with every movement. The mirror above the sink was still there, but fractured now, webbed with cracks that didn't seem to spread any farther. as if they'd reached their limit and stopped mid-scream. For the first time, Evelyn couldn't see her reflection. Not twisted, not delayed, not wrong, just not there at all. She touched the glass. It was cold, but the cracks pulsed faintly beneath her fingers, like something under the surface, still breathing. She pulled her hand back and stared at her palm. It was human, pink, trembling. But in the very center of it, in the lines of skin and blood and life, shimmered something almost invisible, a sliver, thin scar of silver. It hadn't let go of her, not completely, and maybe it never would. Outside, the gas station had gone quiet. There were no cars on the road, no hum from the old fluorescents. Even the vending machines had gone dark. It was as if the moment she drove the shard into her chest, something greater than space or time had hit pause. Or maybe the world just didn't know what to do now that the mirrors weren't in charge. She stepped into the open air, the sun just starting to burn away the early mist. Every surface that had once reflected her now offered nothing. Not silence, not mimicry, just absence. The rearview mirror of her car was blank. The puddle by the fuel pump, black, still, unmoved by wind or shadow. But she wasn't followed. But she wasn't alone. Something stood at the edge of the road, a figure. Not Marley, not a copy, her Evelyn, but older. Her hair streaked with gray, her skin marked by time. She wore a long coat stained at the collar and boots caked with red clay. And she looked back at Evelyn not with warning or hunger, but with recognition. Evelyn froze. "Are you?" The figure nodded once. "I'm what you become." Evelyn stepped forward slow. Her body ached. Her mind tried to catch up. "I thought I stopped it." "Broke it." "You delayed it," the other said. "Shattered what it was. But it's like smoke. It reforms, learns, waits. You didn't kill it. You became the only version strong enough to carry it without becoming it." Evelyn swallowed. "So what now?" The older version of her tilted her head toward the horizon. "Now you walk, you warn, you find the others. There are others." A pause. "And then you weren't the first. You won't be the last." Evelyn felt her legs steady beneath her. She looked down at her scarred hand, the glint of silver still faintly threading her skin. Will it ever go away? The older her didn't smile. "No, but it doesn't have to win. Not if you remember who you are. And not if you keep moving." The figure turned and started down the empty road, boots crunching against gravel. Evelyn hesitated, then followed. No car, no bags, no plan. Just two pairs of footsteps echoing in a world still trying to decide if it could forget what had just happened. As they walked, Evelyn glanced at every passing surface, windows, signs, even her own shadow. Still no reflection. But that was okay, because for once, she didn't need to see herself to know she was real. And behind them, far away but growing, came a sound she recognized not with fear but with understanding. Glass, falling, breaking, reforming. Because somewhere in the cracks between what used to be and what could still come, the memory was learning how to move without mirrors. And when it returned, it wouldn't ask for permission. It would wear a human face. And this time, it would know her name. The next town didn't have a name. Not on the signs, not on the maps, not even etched into the cracked welcome arch that sagged over the road like the jaw of a dead thing. Evelyn and her older self, who didn't offer a name, because what would be the point? Walked in silence beneath a slate, gray sky that refused to brighten. The streets were lined with buildings that looked familiar, though Evelyn knew she'd never been here. Not really. But the shapes whispered to something deep inside her, the tilt of a roof, the angle of a broken window, the way the streetlight leaned like it was listening. It wasn't déjà vu. It was worse. It was as if the town had taken the shape of her memories. The first person they saw was a boy, 8, maybe 9. He stood at the center of an intersection, alone, barefoot, staring at the sky like it owed him something. His face was calm, but his mouth twitched as if repeating a word silently, over and over. Evelyn felt the hair on her arms rise. Is he real? she whispered. Her older self didn't answer. The boy lowered his head when they got close, and Evelyn noticed his eyes. They weren't empty. They weren't cracked. But they weren't right either. There was something in them, like a layer of wax over memory. Like he'd seen too much and was still trying to digest it. "I know you," he said. Evelyn crouched slowly, hands open. "What's your name?" The boy frowned. "You gave it to me?" "When you came last time." Evelyn's breath caught. "I've never been here before." The boy smiled softly, as if she'd said something he'd already heard 100 times. "You always say that. But we both know you're forgetting wrong." Before she could respond, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a tiny mirror shard. Round, like it had been broken from the edge of a makeup compact. He held it out to her. "This one remembers when you burned your hands." It screamed for hours. Still does. Evelyn didn't move. Behind her, the older version stepped forward and gently closed the boy's hand around the shard. "Don't give her pieces," she said quietly. "She's already full." The boy blinked once, then turned and walked down an alley that hadn't been there a moment ago. Evelyn straightened, stomach twisting. What did he mean? Forgetting wrong. The older her looked up at the buildings surrounding them. Every time you survive, you rewrite the memory. So does it. But sometimes the fragments remember pieces you've left behind, things you told them in dreams, promises, names. The versions of you that didn't make it. Evelyn felt sick. Are they alive? They're real, the older self said, but only for as long as you keep walking. It didn't make sense. None of it did, and yet it felt true. Each step deeper into the town made Evelyn feel like she was dragging her shadow through syrup. Windows shimmered faintly, like something just behind the glass was mimicking her walk half a beat behind. Not copying, echoing. And the people, if that's what they were, watched from behind curtains and cracked doors. Every face looked vaguely familiar, like she'd seen them in dreams twisted by fever. They passed a laundromat where every washing machine door had a mirror inside instead of glass. Evelyn caught flashes of herself as they walked, each one slightly wrong. One had no eyes. Another held her breath too long. One, God, was still burning, and none of them blinked. None. By the time they reached what looked like a town square, Evelyn felt hollowed out. Her skin itched from the inside. She felt watched from under her ribs. In the center of the square stood a statue. It wasn't bronze or marble. It was glass, and it was her, mouth open, hands raised. As if screaming silently, dozens of people stood around it, staring, heads tilted, not speaking. And then, as one, they turned to look at her. The glass Evelyn shimmered, light catching in its throat. "She's back," one of the townspeople whispered. "She brought the crack with her. She's not fixed yet. She never was." The crowd began to close in, not rushing, just pressing. The older Evelyn stepped in front of her. "You have to leave. I don't know how." "Then forget again," the older version hissed. "Let go of what you just saw, or this town becomes permanent." Evelyn shook her head. "I can't keep losing pieces of myself just to stay alive." "Then you'll stay here. Forever. Among the ones who remember wrong." The crowd closed tighter. A man reached out. His hand was fused to a spoon. A woman's eyes blinked sideways. One girl wept blood through her fingernails. Evelyn backed away. The glass statue opened its mouth just a little wider and whispered, "Remember me." Then she ran, back the way she came. But the streets didn't lead anywhere. Every road curled back into itself. The buildings doubled, then tripled. Reflections layered on top of each other like transparent film. The older Evelyn's voice echoed from nowhere. "Run wrong enough, and you'll forget how to stop." Evelyn screamed, and the town folded around her like a closing book. Then, nothing. She woke up lying in the passenger seat of the car, Marley behind the wheel. Sunset outside the window. The town of wrong memory gone like a bad dream. No sign of the older version. No boy. No glass statue. Only one thing remained in her lap, the shard, warm, waiting. and behind the setting sun, the mirrors began to glow. Evelyn didn't speak for the first half hour after she woke. Marley, if it was still Marley, didn't push. They drove in silence, tires crunching down a road Evelyn didn't recognize. The landscape had turned strange again, all jagged trees and blacktop that looked poured from ash. There were no birds, no signs, just mile after mile of thickening twilight. And in the glove compartment, Evelyn could feel the shard humming faintly like a trapped heartbeat. She hadn't dared touch it yet, but its warmth leaked through the plastic, a slow pulse that matched the rhythm of her own chest far too closely. She finally spoke when the sky turned purple. "I was inside something," she said quietly, not looking at Marley. "Not a place, not a dream. Al memory glitch. A broken loop trying to convince me it was real. But the people in it, they weren't echoes. They were me. Just in different stages. Forgotten fragments still waiting to be remembered." Marley nodded once, eyes fixed on the road. "It pulled you further in than before." Evelyn frowned. "You knew." "I could feel the car stall. Felt you slip sideways, like a dream dragging weight behind it." Evelyn didn't respond. Her hands were shaking again. Not from fear, from strain. Like her body was fighting to stay tethered to gravity, to the idea of being real. "What happens?" she asked finally, "when I can't come back next time?" Marley didn't answer. The road curved, and then suddenly, with no warning, opened onto a stretch of desert lit by the dying sky. What lay ahead looked like an abandoned facility. Chain link fences curled with rust, cement buildings half sunk into dust, and power lines that drooped without current. At the center of it all was a massive structure, shaped like a cylinder tipped on its side. No windows, no markings, no entrance they could see. But Evelyn knew what it was. She felt what it was. "The graveyard," she whispered. Marley parked the car 100 feet out. "You remember?" "Not from here," Evelyn murmured. "From the dreams. From the times I woke up screaming and didn't know why." They got out. The air was still. Too still. Inside the compound, mirrors were stacked like tombstones, hundreds of them. Some broken, others melted, many whole but dark as obsidian. Evelyn walked between them slowly. The reflections inside flickered faintly, just enough to hint at movement, like something shifting behind thick fog. One mirror caught her eye. It was shaped like a doorway, ringed with antique silver, its surface warped but intact. Inside it, her mother stared back, younger, not dead, not distorted, just standing in a kitchen Evelyn barely remembered. She reached out, then stopped, because the woman blinked. Twice. One blink was slow and natural. The second came an instant later, a reflection catching up. "You shouldn't be here," Marley said behind her. "None of us should." Evelyn turned. "What is this place really?" Marley walked to a nearby shard, tapping it with her finger. The mirror rang out like a tuning fork. "Every time someone breaks a mirror that's touched by the thing, it ends up here. All of them do. Like dying stars caught in gravity. No one brings them. They just show up." Evelyn stepped closer to the central structure, the cylinder. There was something written on it now, etched faintly into the steel. Words that shimmered only when the last light of day struck them. "Her tichi raffioni endes tichi memorar begins." She walked forward, palm against the cool metal. The door opened without a sound. Inside was not a room, and not a hallway. It was a well, and at the bottom, so far down it seemed to vanish into shadow, lay a mirror larger than any she had seen. Round, smooth, impossibly polished. Its surface didn't reflect light. It reflected truth. She knew this instinctively. It was where all the fractured versions went to be erased, or remade. Marley stood beside her now. "If you look into it, it shows the you that no longer exists. The you that all the others are trying to become again." Evelyn shook her head. "Why would they want to be me?" "Because you survived." The silence stretched between them. And then Evelyn said what she'd feared for weeks. "I don't think I did." Marley didn't flinch. "That's why you have to decide. If you keep walking, the pieces will keep coming. fragments, doubles, memories pretending to be real. Until one day, there's more them than you. And if I stop, you give it all back. You empty yourself out. You let the mirror take every version that broke and leave you with only what never was. Evelyn felt the shard in her coat pocket grow warm again. It wanted to go into the well, so did she, part of her anyway. But the cost, no memories of her mother, no memory of Marley, no attic, no mirror, no war, just emptiness, silence, freedom. Evelyn, step out, she said. If I forget it all, then what was the point of surviving? Marley's eyes softened. That's the part most people get wrong. She turned and walked away, back toward the graveyard of mirrors. Evelyn stood at the edge of the well for a long time, the hum of the great mirror vibrating in her bones. Then she reached into her coat, pulled out the shard, and threw it in. It didn't clink, it didn't shatter, it sank, and far below the great mirror blinked. Once, then silence, and Evelyn turned her back on it. For now. The night fell without a sunset. One moment Evelyn stood in the pale dust near the mirror graveyard, the horizon warm with color, and the next, darkness. No stars, no wind, just the immediate, oppressive absence of light. Marley had vanished again. No goodbye, no footprints in the sand. One moment present, the next gone like a breath held too long and then forgotten. Evelyn didn't chase her. She'd stopped chasing shadows that wore familiar skin. What mattered now wasn't who stayed. It was who remained. The mirror shard was gone, sunk into the great well, swallowed by whatever machine memory had become. And yet Evelyn felt its presence more strongly than ever, humming just behind her heartbeat. Her chest was empty, but her reflection had begun whispering again, no longer through glass, but through instinct. The way she hesitated before opening doors, the way she turned toward reflections that weren't there. Something within her had learned how to reflect from the inside out, and that was when the dreams began again. Not nightmares. Worse, they were familiar. Evelyn saw herself as a child, running barefoot through a house that shifted and reformed every time she turned a corner. Not the real house, the cursed one, but something older, something truer. Each room was a version of her, made physical, a hallway filled with unopened letters, a kitchen where no food ever cooked, only burned, a living room where a family portrait repainted itself every time she blinked. And always, in every frame, every corner, every mirror, her, just watching, not hostile, not warning, just present. She would wake gasping, heart hammering, the air thick with invisible pressure. There were no more shards, no more copies, no more chases. But she knew now what had always been waiting at the end of the journey. The original version, the first Evelyn, the one who never made it out of the mirror. Maybe she hadn't just cracked reality when she broke the first frame. Maybe she'd split herself in two, one who walked out, one who stayed behind, and the one who stayed, trapped in silver and glass and dreams for all these years, had watched her stumble, fight, forget, remember, run, and now it wanted its turn. The world began to shift around her. At first, subtly. The sky sometimes showed her face when she looked too long. Shadows hung from her feet, even at noon. When she tried to speak to a cashier at a roadside diner, the man repeated her question back to her, word for word, like a recording. "Can I use your restroom? Can I use your restroom?" His mouth moved. His eyes did not. Evelyn left without finishing her meal. In another town, the buildings had no doors, just blank walls where entrances should have been. In another, every mirror she passed reflected her standing still, even when she was in motion. The world wasn't breaking. It was preparing. And the worst moment, the one that finally stripped her of any illusion that she still had time, came in the middle of a gas station parking lot. She looked up at the security camera mounted above the pump. The feed played back on a small screen behind the glass of the attendant's booth. She saw herself pumping gas, and beside her, not walking, not approaching, just standing, watching her pump gas, perfect stillness, barefoot, wearing the same coat. Hair soaked from a rain that wasn't falling. Eyes black, not in color, but in depth. Evelyn turned immediately. No one there. She looked back at the screen. Still there, watching, waiting, not smiling, not reaching, just waiting for her to understand. And she did. The shard hadn't sunk because it was dead. It had sunk because it had finished learning. Now it was building, not copies, not fragments, not memory. It was building the one version strong enough to finish what she'd started. The original Evelyn. The one she had left behind, forgotten. Cut off in some dream, soaked attic where light refused to enter. And that Evelyn. She didn't want revenge. She didn't want escape. She wanted to be made real again. Evelyn started driving without knowing the destination. Her hands gripped the wheel so tightly the skin split. The blood shimmered silver under the streetlights. This time, there would be no graveyard, no reflection to break, no fake Marley to scream her name. This time it would be Evelyn versus Evelyn, and only one would walk away. The air grew colder as she drove, frost spreading across the inside of her windshield, even though the heat blasted on high. The dashboard flickered, the dials rotating without reason. The car began to shake, not violently, but rhythmically, like it was following a beat she couldn't hear. The road ahead shimmered. She drove through it, and emerged on a street she recognized instantly, her childhood home, untouched, lights in the windows, curtains shifting, and in the upper floor, her bedroom, lit from within. She parked, hands numb, breath fogging the air. Her feet crunched old leaves as she stepped from the car. And in the upstairs window, Evelyn saw herself, not waiting, not watching, but smiling, as if to say finally. The front door opened before she could knock, and Evelyn stepped inside, knowing the next room she entered would hold the version of her that never escaped, the shard that dreamed it was whole, now awake. The door shut behind her without a sound. No creak, no slam, just a hush like a breath taken in but never let out. The house hadn't changed. It wore the same skin it had when she was 9, when her mother vanished and the mirrors started watching. The hallway smelled of old wood and lemon cleaner, the floorboards bowed in the same places. A photo of her younger self still hung crooked on the wall. The glass over it cracked, but the break had healed. The line no longer splintered her smile. It curved around it, framing it, like the mirror itself had learned to admire the lie. Evelyn's boots echoed as she walked deeper into the home. No voices, no footsteps, just silence that carried weight, the kind that thickened in your lungs and wrapped around your thoughts until even your memories started speaking in whispers. The living room was frozen in time, television off, sofa cushions stiff with dust. An untouched teacup on the end table that might have waited decades for a final sip. She knew if she touched it, the tea would still be warm. That was how this place worked. It didn't remember time. It remembered intention. Whatever someone had left unfinished in the house still hummed with life, like the air itself was trapped in the moment of goodbye. But Evelyn wasn't here to mourn. She climbed the staircase slowly, fingers grazing the banister where her mother used to tap out lullabies with chipped nails. Every step brought more weight. She could feel it pressing down through the ceiling. Her, the one who'd been left behind. The shard that stayed. The twin born not from blood, but from fracture. The bedroom door at the top of the stairs was open. Light poured out, not golden, not warm, but silver, cold, like moonlight passed through water. Evelyn stepped into it. She stood at the threshold of her own childhood room, but the walls had stretched. The ceiling rose higher than it should have, the floor longer, the space deeper. And at the center, sitting cross-legged on the bed she'd once wept into after her mother disappeared, was herself. Not older, not younger, just timeless. She looked up and smiled. Not cruelly, not with malice, but with relief. "You finally came back," the reflection said. Evelyn's throat tightened. "You're not real." The other tilted her head. Neither are you. Not anymore. Evelyn stepped in fully, and the light around her dimmed, as if the house was adjusting to her presence. Accepting her weight, her reality, she studied the version of herself on the bed. This one looked cleaner. Eyes clear, hair brushed, fingernails pink and unbroken. There was a calm about her. Too calm. It made Evelyn feel like a splinter under skin. "What are you?" she asked. "I'm what you buried," the other Evelyn said softly. "The version of you that never screamed. Never ran. Never broke the mirror. That version died." "No." She waited. The air thickened. The mirror beside the bed buzzed faintly. Evelyn glanced at it. It showed no reflection, just movement. A blur, like a figure trying to push through fog. Then it cleared. For one moment. Her mother, not smiling, not waving, just staring at her, eyes rimmed in red, mouth slightly parted, as if she had been calling for her this whole time. Evelyn stepped back. "That's not her." The other Evelyn nodded. "No, but it's the last place she lived, inside me, inside this room, inside the memory you couldn't handle." A pause. Then she stood, and the room tightened. The walls slid closer. The light snapped off like breath pulled from a candle. The mirror darkened. "I'm whole," the shard said. "And you're not." Evelyn clenched her fists. "You think that means you get to replace me? I don't want to replace you." The shard whispered, "I want to merge." And that word hit Evelyn like a crack splitting her spine. The reflections had been chasing her not to kill her, not to steal her face. They wanted to return. They were all pieces. And now that the core had finally pulled itself together in this house, it wanted to finish what had begun the night the first mirror broke. Evelyn reached into her coat. Her hand came away empty. No weapon. No glass. Just fingers. And a memory. The lullaby. The one her mother used to hum while brushing her hair. Evelyn began to sing. Soft, broken, off key, but true. The other Evelyn flinched, and for the first time she looked uncertain. "You forgot that," Evelyn said, "didn't you?" The shard opened her mouth, closed it. "I remember everything else," she said, voice trembling now. "But not her voice," Evelyn whispered. "Because you weren't there when she held me. You were already forming in the mirror. You don't get to have that." The mirror beside the bed cracked. Once. Twice. The wall behind it trembled. And the other Evelyn fell to her knees. "You're just a wound," Evelyn said, stepping forward. "And I've been bleeding long enough." She touched the shard on the forehead, and the house exhaled. The light burst outward. The mirror shattered inward. And the walls screamed. Evelyn stood alone again. The room returned to normal size. Her reflection was gone. Just her now. Just her. She walked out of the house and didn't look back. This time, she didn't have to run, because there was no one left behind. When the sun rose the next morning, it didn't rise into a world made of silver. It rose into one made of silence. True silence, not the kind that hummed with secrets or waited with bated breath, but a calm born from the closing of a door that had been left open too long. Evelyn stood at the edge of the field behind her childhood home, staring out at grass that moved like normal grass, wind that felt like real wind, and a sky that didn't shimmer with buried reflections. For the first time in what felt like years, nothing stared back at her. She turned to look at the house. It was smaller now. Unthreatening. The windows didn't whisper. The curtains didn't twitch. The mirror in her old bedroom had shattered completely, and the shards had turned gray, no longer reflective, no longer humming. Just broken glass, lifeless as stone. And in the pit of her chest, the thing that had once pulsed silver had gone quiet. Not gone, just dormant. Waiting, maybe, but no longer reaching. Every mirror she passed on her walk into town that morning, car windows, storefront glass, the pond near the church, showed only what it was supposed to her. One Evelyn, one face, one present moment. The world had, for now, stopped watching her. The townspeople noticed too, the ones who had been hollowed out, looped, trapped in repeating gestures and phrases. They blinked. They yawned. They forgot. Their eyes softened. Their movements unspooled from puppet jerks into something human again. A man at the corner grocer looked at his own reflection in the cooler glass and flinched, not out of fear, but surprise. "That's me," he said, like he wasn't expecting it, like it had been years since he'd seen his own face honestly. Evelyn didn't stay long. She had nothing left to explain, no warnings to give. The curse wasn't lifted, not entirely. It was seeping. That much she knew. But the pulse of it, this living chain of mirrors and memory and loss, had recoiled. It had been seen, confronted, merged, and that had been enough to dull its hunger. For now, she walked. No destination, just movement. She passed through towns where no one recognized her, which was a relief. In one of them, a young girl ran out of a barber shop with a mirror shard in her hand, laughing, not knowing what it had once been. Evelyn smiled, but didn't stop her. The piece had no heat, no hum, just glass. In another town, she stopped to eat. A man across the diner waved to her. She didn't know him. He looked like someone who might have once worn her brother's face, or a reflection she'd seen in the dream house with the attic that never ended. But he was just a man now, alone, reading the paper. Coffee cold. No one mentioned the mirrors. No one remembered. But Evelyn carried the memory for them, not as a burden, as a record, because someone had to remember how easily it had all fractured. One mirror. That's all it had taken. One mirror in a hallway catching a child at the wrong moment. And from that single break had come years of twisted echoes, reflections given life, memory loops that rewrote the past until it no longer belonged to her. She remembered all of it now. Her mother's voice in the attic. The original shard hidden in the walls of the house. The first time she spoke to her reflection, and it spoke back in a different tone. The way the town watched her, each pair of eyes not afraid of her, but of what she carried. That fear was gone now. But Evelyn knew the mirror world hadn't vanished. It had simply lost its grip. She saw signs of its old self sometimes. An old mirror left at a curbside, blank, a bird flying into its own reflection on a window and staggering back, not dead, but dazed. A phone screen flickering for a moment longer than it should, showing a face that wasn't holding the device. All glitches. All harmless, for now. But cracks come back, especially in the hearts of people who can't forget. Evelyn stayed moving. Always one town ahead of the next loop. She didn't carry weapons. She didn't need to. She'd already faced the worst part of herself, and chosen to keep living. And that, the choice to live with memory, not run from it, was stronger than any mirror. One night, weeks later, she slept in a motel with no reflective surfaces, no metal faucets, no TVs, just a bed, a wooden nightstand, and a notebook. She wrote one sentence in it: "I was broken and I stayed anyway." She didn't sign it. Didn't need to. Somewhere far away, in a place where reflections used to whisper and glass used to weep, a mirror blinked in an empty house. But it didn't speak. It just listened. And waited. Because even if the mirror world had gone blind, it still remembered her face. She first appeared in a town that didn't even have a name on its welcome sign, just a rusted outline where letters once hung and a population count someone had scratched out entirely. The locals didn't notice her at first. She didn't stand out. No storm clouds followed her. No strange music played when she walked past. She looked like any other girl: jeans, sweatshirt, boots worn at the edges. But when she passed windows, they didn't react. Not in the usual way. Not with delayed movements or warped shadows. They simply showed nothing. No reflection. No trace. Just empty glass. They began to whisper about her after the fourth day. First in the diner, then in the post office, then in the church, where the priest forgot his sermon mid-sentence and stared at the stained glass window behind the altar, lips parting in silent dread, because in that window, where saints and stories were frozen in color, the space that once showed a divine figure now reflected nothing. as if the presence of the girl had erased even the memory of presence itself. They said she never spoke, that she always looked tired, that when you looked into her eyes too long, you didn't see your face mirrored back. You saw your regrets, smeared across the surface of her iris like fogged glass. Some claimed she slept in the forest just outside the edge of town, never needing shelter, fire, or warmth. Others swore they saw her standing in front of the closed, down theater on Main Street, staring at the cracked marquee like it owed her something. But Evelyn knew who the girl was. She didn't need rumors. She knew it the second she saw her, standing across the street in the dusk, hands stuffed into her sweatshirt pockets, mouth set in that quiet, unreadable line. Evelyn had been walking without purpose, tracing the old highways again, stopping in towns that smelled like endings. And there she was, not a reflection, not a copy, not a memory, something new, or perhaps the very last echo of everything Evelyn had left behind. She crossed the road, her boots crunching softly on gravel, never breaking eye contact. The girl didn't move, didn't flinch, only watched her with the kind of stillness that couldn't be taught. "You're not from here," Evelyn said, voice low. The girl tilted her head, just slightly. "Neither are you." That voice, it was her own, but younger, stripped of exhaustion, of defiance, of time. "I buried the last version of you in the house," Evelyn said. "You shouldn't exist." "I don't." The girl's voice didn't waver. "That's why I can't leave." Something clicked in Evelyn's chest, like a lock tumbling into place. She stepped closer. "You're what's left after the mirror dies." The girl nodded. "The shard never wanted to become whole," she said. "It wanted to strip everything away, until there was only this left, a version of you so thin it casts no reflection. A shell, a quiet." Evelyn felt cold. "So what now? Are you going to haunt me? Take my place?" "No," the girl whispered. "I'm going to end it." She turned without another word and walked toward the theater. The one no one had entered in years, its doors chained shut, its sign rusted and illegible. Evelyn followed. Inside, the lobby was coated in dust and stillness. Movie posters hung torn on the walls, showing films that never existed, actors with blank eyes and hollow mouths. A single mirror stood behind the concessions counter, untouched by time or decay. But it didn't reflect the theater. It reflected everything Evelyn had ever lost. Her mother, Marley, the shard, the loop, the screams, the attic, and at the center, the girl, standing inside the reflection looking out. "This is where it ends," the girl said, turning to Evelyn. "This is the last piece of the mirror's hunger. The final scene it wants to play before it goes black forever." Evelyn's voice broke. "I'm tired of endings." The girl stepped aside. "Then don't watch. Just close your eyes and walk away." Evelyn looked at the mirror. It shimmered once, and then began to crack, not from impact, not from force, but from choice. One line, then two, then 10. A slow, silent shattering, until the reflection was gone, not destroyed, just released. The girl was still beside her, but her outline was fading. She looked at Evelyn and, for the first time, smiled. "You held it long enough," she whispered. "Now you don't have to anymore." And then she was gone. No scream, no light, just gone. Evelyn left the theater as the first rain in weeks began to fall, gentle, forgiving, real. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. Because for the first time in her life, she cast a shadow that belonged only to her. The rain lasted through the night, washing the dust from towns that had long forgotten what clean air felt like. It softened edges, peeled back years of dried mud and soot from walls, and revealed names on street signs that had once been scrawled over or scraped clean. It didn't bring salvation. It didn't bring answers. But it brought change. And in the morning, when the clouds drifted apart like bruises fading from the sky, Evelyn walked without urgency for the first time since the mirrors started calling her name. There were no more fragments, no more looping towns, no more ghost versions waiting in reflections to mimic her breath. just the wind in the trees and her boots on the damp earth. And for the first time in what felt like forever, the silence wasn't heavy. It was hers, earned, honest. She didn't know what day it was, didn't care. Time had never been on her side anyway. She came across a small hill by the road, no marker, no trail. Just a mound of earth barely noticeable, unless you knew what you were looking for. She knew. Something pulled her to it. The way memory doesn't just sit in the back of your head, but moves through your body, dragging you toward the place it began. At the top was a single mirror, not broken, not glowing, not humming, just standing upright in a wooden frame, no hooks, no glass supports, no explanation. The wind should have knocked it over, but it didn't move. It was as if the ground held it still, not out of fear, but respect. Evelyn approached slowly. Her heart didn't race, her skin didn't crawl, the air didn't tense. The mirror showed her reflection, perfectly. Every scar, every freckle, every tired line under her eyes, but nothing else. No shimmer behind her, no double hiding in the blur, no whisper trying to steal her breath. Just her. She stared at it for a long time, waiting for the shift that never came. Then she stepped closer and placed a hand on the surface. It was warm, not inhuman, not supernatural, just warm, like something had finally come to rest inside the glass. She remembered the attic, the first break, her mother's voice, Marley's warnings, the silence after the scream, all of it, and yet, none of it chained her anymore. She didn't need to speak aloud. The mirror already knew. It had watched long enough. She didn't shatter it, didn't turn away. She simply took a breath and stepped through it, and walked out the other side. No trick, no twist. Just grass beneath her feet and sunlight on her shoulders. And when she turned back, the mirror was gone. Not broken, not faded, just absent. Like it had fulfilled its purpose and decided, quietly, to stop existing. She walked until her legs ached, until her memories softened, until the H behind her ribs stopped feeling like a splinter and started feeling like space for new thoughts, new breaths, new versions of herself that didn't come with blood-stained reflections. Eventually, she found a town, one that wasn't haunted, a place with clean streets, tired people, and honest laughter that carried from porches in the early evening. She found a room above a bookstore, got a job stacking shelves, drank coffee too hot, woke without screaming, went to sleep without a knife under her pillow. She never told anyone what she'd been through. They wouldn't have believed it, and she didn't need them to. Because the truth wasn't in the mirrors anymore. It was in her. And every now and then, when she passed a window or polished a metal surface, she'd see her reflection and pause, just long enough to be sure it was her. It always was. But even if it wasn't, she wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Because the mirror no longer held her story. She did, and that was enough.